I was 9 years old when it happened, back in the fall of 2014. I lived in a quiet little town called Maple Hollow, the sort of place where everyone knew your name and nothing ever seemed to change. Life had a rhythm, predictable and safe. My name's Jake Lansing, and I went to Cedar Hill Elementary, just 2 blocks from our house. Days were ordinary, almost dull in their routine. But that year something new had gripped the internet. Slender Man. Creepy drawings, strange games, rumors swirling like fog. Every kid at school knew the stories. At recess we dared each other to summon him in the bathroom mirror, whispering his name like it might make him appear. Some kids claimed they'd seen him in the woods behind the school. I never believed it, not fully. It was just a thrill, a conversation starter while we traded Pokemon cards waiting for the bell to ring. But one weekend in late October, everything changed. Not in the way of a spooky story you could laugh off later, but in the way fear burrows into your chest, leaving you awake at night, listening for things that may or may not exist. It began with a dream. That Saturday, my mom had taken me to the new McDonald's across town, the one near the highway, bigger than the old one on Main Street. Dad was stuck at the lumberyard working a double, so it was just the 2 of us. I remember it so vividly. The smell of fries, the low hum of conversation, the laughter of kids running through the play place. I had a Happy Meal, chicken nuggets and a small Sprite, and we sat in a booth by the window. Mom was scrolling through Facebook on her phone, occasionally chuckling at something, and I was staring outside, watching the clouds drift in strange, jagged shapes. The sky had this weird gray-orange glow, like the world had been filtered through something unnatural. "Mom, look at that," I said, pointing. "It's like everything's off." She glanced up, smiled faintly. "Looks like rain's coming, Jake." Across the room, a man sat alone. He was tall, too tall, and wore a long black trench coat with a fedora tilted low over his face. I didn't see him eating. A coffee cup sat untouched before him. Every few minutes I caught myself looking back, and I swear he was staring right at me. Just sitting, watching, unmoving. We left shortly after. Mom didn't notice him at all, but I couldn't stop looking back as we walked to the car. He hadn't moved. He was still there, unmoving, staring. That night I had the worst nightmare of my life. I was back in the McDonald's, but it was empty, silent, and the lights flickered, throwing grotesque shadows across the tiled floor. I stood near the counter, heart hammering. The soda machine behind me hissed sharply, making me jump. Then I saw him, the tall man. Only he wasn't wearing a coat or a hat anymore. He had no face, just smooth, pale skin where a face should have been. His arms were impossibly long, dangling like ropes at his sides. He stood in the hallway leading to the bathrooms, blocking the exit. I couldn't move. My legs felt fused to the floor. Then he started toward me, slow, deliberate steps. His head tilted slightly as if studying me, though there were no eyes to see. I spun and ran, diving into the play place. But the tunnels were wrong, warped, twisted. The slides stretched into endless black tubes leading nowhere. I screamed, the sound swallowed by darkness, and that's when I woke up. Sweat-drenched, heart hammering like a drum, I sat upright. The red glow of the digital clock read 2:30 a.m. I couldn't breathe properly, my chest tight, my mind racing with the image of that faceless man. And even then, half awake in my quiet room, I felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. I got out of bed and tiptoed to my parents' room. I hadn't done that in years, but something about that night made me feel small and vulnerable. My voice barely rose above a whisper. "Mom, I had a bad dream. Can I sleep here?" Her eyes fluttered open, still heavy with sleep. She gave a soft nod and scooted over, making space. I curled up on the floor between the bed and the dresser with an old blanket, trying to feel safe. My dad's steady snoring and Mom's rhythmic breathing helped, just a little, as I started to drift back into sleep. Then the fire alarm screamed to life. Not a timid beep or chirp. This was a full-on shrill siren that tore through the quiet of the house. My dad shot upright, nearly hitting the nightstand. "What the hell?" he muttered, fumbling for the flashlight. They rushed through the house, checking the kitchen first. Oven off, no smoke, no smell of burning wires. Room by room they searched, nothing, no fire, no danger. Just the relentless blaring alarm for no apparent reason. It took them a full minute to reset it. When they finally returned, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, clutching my blanket like armor. Mom touched my forehead gently. "You okay, honey?" "Yeah," I whispered, my voice shaky. I dreamed about the tall man again." She frowned. "Tall man?" I didn't answer. How could I explain that the man from my nightmare looked exactly like the one at McDonald's that afternoon? They muttered something about a malfunction. Old wiring maybe, but in the 10 years we'd lived there, the alarm had never gone off randomly. The next day, things only got stranger. I stayed home, too nervous to go anywhere. Every time I passed a window, it felt like someone was watching me. Once I paused at the blinds and swore I saw a figure across the street, standing near the lamppost. When I looked again, he was gone. Around 6 that evening, Dad suggested we pick up dinner. I begged him not to go back to that McDonald's. Why not? You love their nuggets, he said, raising an eyebrow. Please, I said, my voice urgent. Anywhere but there. So we went to Burger King instead. That night, sleep was impossible. I kept the lamp on and curled in bed, trying to drown the silence with Mario Kart on my DS. But sometime after midnight, the room became icy cold, the air sharp and biting like frost. No alarm this time. Instead, the hallway light flickered on by itself. I froze, staring at the crack beneath the door. Then I heard them, footsteps, soft, deliberate, intentional. My hand trembled so badly I dropped the DS. The footsteps stopped just outside my bedroom. My chest tightened. The door creaked open slowly. I screamed, a raw, instinctual scream, and my parents rushed in seconds later. But when the lights came on, the door was wide open and no one was there. After that, things seemed to settle, though the feeling never really left. The alarm stayed silent. The lights stopped flickering, and I eventually returned to my own bed, always leaving the hallway light on. But a part of me still felt watched, a lingering unease that I could never shake. Years later, I looked up that McDonald's. It had closed permanently in 2017. Rumors persisted, lights malfunctioning, a child going missing in the play place for 20 minutes only to be found trembling under a slide, employees quitting after reporting a tall man standing near the bathroom hallway. I never told anyone, but I know what I saw. That night when I dreamed of him and the alarm blared, I think he came through. He followed me home. And even now, part of me can't help but wonder if he's still waiting. I never imagined a part-time job at McDonald's would leave a mark on me so deep it lingered into adulthood. But that's exactly what happened. My name's Ila, and I was 17 at the time. I had just gotten my driver's license and started working at the McDonald's just 5 minutes from my house, in a quiet suburb outside Dayton, Ohio. It wasn't exactly my dream job, far from it, but it paid easy money, and I needed to save for college. I mostly worked evening shifts after school, sometimes late nights on weekends if someone called out. The staff was mostly other high school kids, like me, with a few single moms who somehow balanced work and family with more grace than I could imagine. They treated us like we were part of their own small family. The manager, Mrs. Parker, was in her 50s, a classic no-nonsense type. But she had a soft side if you did your work right. I should also mention my grandmother, whom we all called Lola. She spent most of her life working for a wealthy family in upstate New York. She loved telling us chilling stories about the old mansion she worked in, doors that creaked on their own, heirlooms that shifted when no one was around, mirrors that reflected faces that weren't there. We always assumed she was exaggerating. I certainly did, at least until that night. The McDonald's I worked at wasn't the bustling downtown kind. It was tucked into a small strip mall between a pharmacy and a laundromat. Most nights were slow. A few high school kids hanging out in the booths, the occasional drive-through order. The lobby closed at 11 p.m., but on weekends the drive-through stayed open until midnight. We'd lock the front doors, turn off the lobby lights, and finish cleaning the kitchen while the drive-through crew stayed back. That Saturday night, there were 4 of us on shift. Me, Travis on the grill, Rema on drive-through, and Carla, who usually did prep and the register. Mrs. Parker had called out earlier. Her grandson had a fever, so Carla was left in charge. From the start, something felt off. It started small. Around 10:45, our last dining customers, a teenage couple, left without finishing their fries. I was wiping down the tables near the window when I noticed her. A woman standing at the entrance. She didn't knock, didn't push the door, just stood there. She had long, dark hair, pale skin, and wore a heavy tan coat. The kind you'd expect an elderly woman to wear in the dead of winter. The problem? It was early September and it was still warm that night. I nudged Carla. Someone's at the door. She peeked over the counter, squinting. Drive-through. Ignore her. Probably waiting for someone. I nodded but couldn't shake the feeling. She was staring through the glass, completely still like a mannequin. 10 minutes passed. She was still there. Then another appeared. Same coat, same blank stare. Side by side, they didn't speak, didn't move, didn't even glance at each other. They just stared at me. I walked to the kitchen where Travis was scraping the grill. Hey, man.
Have you seen them?
He leaned over to peek. Damn, that's creepy. Think it's a prank? I don't know, I muttered. They've been standing there a while. Maybe they want food, Rema suggested from the drive-through window. I waved toward the window, mouthing drive-through, but they didn't acknowledge me. No blink, no movement, no sign they'd even registered me. By 11:05, Carla told me to start stacking chairs while she counted the till. I grabbed a chair near the door and then I heard it, the unmistakable click of the front door unlocking. I froze. That door was supposed to be locked. No one should have had the key except Carla and Mrs. Parker. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I swallowed hard, heart hammering. Carla, I didn't touch it, she said, her voice tighter than usual. Her eyes darted to the door, but she didn't move. I glanced back at the windows. They were gone. Just gone. The chairs in my hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. And then I heard it again. Soft, deliberate footsteps inside the lobby moving toward the counter. I could feel my stomach drop, every instinct screaming that something was very wrong. Travis, I whispered. They're inside. He froze, spatula in hand, eyes wide. No, that's impossible. I locked it, but the sound kept coming. Slow, measured steps echoing against the tiles. And then I saw her, a shadow moving just past the counter. Two of them. Not like humans. Not quite. Their faces were empty. But their eyes, if you could call them that, seemed to pierce straight through me. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The air had changed. Thick. Heavy. Like the calm before a storm, but colder. Louder. Filled with something unnameable. And then Carla's voice cut through the tension, shaking. We need to get out now. I grabbed her arm, trembling. The door, the window, it didn't matter. Those figures were already there in the room, staring at us like predators who had been waiting a long time for their prey. Parker, did you just unlock the door? I called out, my voice shaking. Carla looked up from the register, startled. What? No! I turned just in time to see the door swing open on its own. The two women stepped inside. No creak, no squeak from the hinges, nothing. Just the soft tap of their shoes on the tile, steady and deliberate. Rema poked her head out from the kitchen. Did you let them in? No, I snapped. They walked straight toward me. My legs faltered and I stumbled behind the counter as Carla stepped forward, trying to stay calm. You'll need to go through the drive-through, she said firmly. The taller woman didn't respond. She leaned over the counter, hands folded neatly in front of her, addressing Rema at the window. We're here. My blood ran cold. I was just wiping the tables, I stammered. You can't be in here. You saw us first. The other woman's voice cut through sharply. So, you must listen. Carla fumbled for her phone. Okay, I'm calling the cops, she said, trying to sound steady. The smiling woman's gaze locked onto mine, unblinking. Her voice was barely a whisper, yet it filled the space. You should not have looked at us now. You'll see what we see. Then she turned to Carla. You should not have interrupted. And then, suddenly, all the lights cut out. Total suffocating darkness. We screamed, all of us, my voice shaking, high-pitched. Me, Rema! Travis! I heard Carla shouting into her phone, trying desperately to reach 911. A few seconds later, dim red emergency lights flickered on from the back hallway. That's when I saw them again. Not the two women. Something else. By the soda machines, a crouched figure slowly rose. Its skin looked raw, wet, glistening like exposed muscle. Its eyes had no whites, just black voids that seemed to swallow the dim light. I turned and bolted toward the back. Rema grabbed my arm, pulling me into the freezer. Travis and Carla followed, slamming the heavy metal door shut behind us. We were all gasping for air. I was shaking so badly I could barely cry. What the hell was that? Travis panted. They didn't come in through the drive-through, Rema whispered, her voice trembling. They just appeared. "We need to get out," Carla said, voice quivering. "The back door, the fire exit." But when Travis tried to open the freezer, it wouldn't budge. The lock wasn't electronic. It wasn't supposed to lock from the outside. Then the music started. Slow, warped, the McDonald's jingle distorted through the ceiling speakers. We huddled together, frozen, for what felt like hours. When the lights finally returned, we cracked the door open cautiously. Everything appeared normal. The lobby was empty, tables and chairs untouched. The women gone. But then I saw it, scrawled across the touchscreen kiosk in the front. Smeared with ketchup was a message. She opened the curtain. "Now we walk with her." I didn't want to understand what it meant. I didn't want to think about it. The cameras recorded nothing. No trace of the women, no sign of the power outage. Just static between 11:04 and 11:22 p.m. We all quit the next day. I haven't eaten at McDonald's since. But sometimes, late at night, when I pass the old building, I swear I see them. 2 women in tan coats, standing by the window, smiling, still waiting. I was 10 the year it happened. It was 2012, and my family had just moved to Redmond, a tiny industrial town in northern Missouri, the kind of place where everyone either worked at the feed plant, the sawmill, or the 24-hour McDonald's on Main Street. That McDonald's wasn't anything special, except if you were a kid with too much time and parents who worked double shifts. We were a big family, 7 of us crammed into a battered rental house on the outskirts of town. My dad, Gary, had recently been laid off in St. Louis, and my mom, Rena, took the night shift at the gas station nearby. My older siblings picked up the slack wherever they could. Janelle, 16, worked every evening at McDonald's after school. Derek, 13, babysat me, our little sister Maya, and our baby brother Toby. Money was tight, but somehow we managed until the night he came. The house should have been my first warning. It was old, paint peeling in long vertical strips, and the wooden stairs groaned under even the lightest step. The windows were warped, glass rippling like water, and none had proper locks. The basement was worse, no floor, just packed dirt and spiderwebs thick enough to look like cotton candy. We called it the pit, and none of us ever went down there. The basement door had a heavy iron bolt, the kind you'd see on barn doors locking from the outside. My dad shrugged it off. "Probably some paranoid old owner," he said, installing a new deadbolt on the front door. "The place will be fine." Spoiler, it wasn't. I shared a room with Derek, which he hated, but I liked it. I always slept with a small light on, a cheap plug-in shaped like a cartoon bear. Yes, it was childish, but the dark made my skin crawl. Derek, thinking I was asleep, would always turn it off, and I'd sneak over to flick it back on. Our window faced the backyard, which meant that every trip to the bathroom at night meant walking past the kitchen and the huge uncovered back window. Anyone who's lived in a sketchy neighborhood knows. Never look out the windows at night, and definitely don't walk past them. It was a bitter February Friday. Janelle had just come home from her shift at McDonald's, shivering and exhausted. She dropped her jacket on the floor and collapsed on the couch. Dad was asleep upstairs, and Mom wouldn't be home until morning. Around 3 a.m., I woke up needing to pee. I tried to ignore it, hoping I'd fall back asleep, but the urge only got worse. I reluctantly climbed out of bed, tiptoeing into the hallway. The house was quiet, too quiet. I sped past the kitchen, eyes fixed on the floor, my usual strategy to avoid looking at the windows. And then I stopped. Tap, 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 tap. I froze mid-step. Pressed against the glass was a man. He looked like he'd been living in the woods for years. Tangled hair, a thick gray beard, filthy clothes. He cupped his hands to the glass, eyes locked on the inside, staring like he knew exactly who lived here. My throat went dry and I backed away, heart hammering, ducking behind the couch where Janelle still slept. Pinching myself didn't help. I wasn't dreaming. Then came the sound that made my blood run cold. The back door lock turned. He had a key. He opened the door slowly, calmly, like he'd done it 100 times before. He stepped in, shutting the door behind him without a sound. He was tall, easily 6'2", wearing a tattered coat over a hoodie. A black baseball cap shadowed most of his face. He didn't even glance around. He went straight for the kitchen pantry, opened it, grabbed a bag of chips, and started eating like he owned the place. Then, without hesitation, he turned and unbolted the basement door. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but my body froze. I could only watch as he opened the basement, stepped inside, and slowly pulled the door shut behind him. My hands shook uncontrollably. How did he have a key? Why the basement? Had he done this before? I needed help. Derek had a phone. I didn't. I started crawling toward our bedroom, every nerve on edge, when I froze again. I heard footsteps coming up from the basement. My heart froze. I looked around the room and spotted my little brother Toby's blanket draped over a chair. Without thinking, I grabbed it, wrapped it around my feet, and began dragging myself across the floor, trying to muffle any sound. My hands shook as I reached the bedroom door, slamming it shut just as the man reached the top of the stairs. Boom. The door rattled violently. He pounded on it once, hard enough to make the walls shiver. I jumped back, adrenaline surging, and bolted to the kitchen. My eyes scanned the drawers, landing on the biggest knife I could find. I gripped it tightly and sprinted upstairs. "Dad, wake up!" I screamed. My dad shot upright, groggy but instantly alert. "What? Maya, what's wrong?" "There's a man in the basement!" I gasped, shoving the knife into his hands, my panic making my words tumble over one another. He had a key. He came in, he went downstairs. He's trying to get out. My dad didn't hesitate. Former Army, broad-shouldered, always ready for a fight. He growled, "Stay here." At that moment, my mom appeared in the doorway, eyes wide, breath catching. "Gary, and what's going on?" "There's someone in the house," I said, tugging at her sleeve. "He's in the basement. He tried to get out." I locked it just in time. Her eyes darted toward the living room. "Where's Janelle?" "She's still on the couch," I cried. We ran downstairs together, and just as we reached the bottom, the basement door burst open. The man charged out, tackling my dad and slamming him into the floor. "Gary!" Mom screamed, panic twisting her voice. They wrestled, a blur of limbs. My dad tried to pin him down, but the man thrashed like a wild animal. My brain shut off. I stumbled back to the kitchen, grabbing another knife, hands trembling violently. I didn't think, I just moved. Heart pounding, I rushed back. "Give it to me!" My mom shouted, grabbing the knife from my shaking hands. Before I could even blink, she plunged it into the man's back. He let out a guttural, horrifying scream, a sound that still haunts my nightmares. My dad flipped him over, pinning him face down, locking his arms. Then came the sirens. The police stormed in, flashlights cutting through the chaos. My siblings ran into the room, screaming at the sight of blood on the floor. Janelle covered her mouth, eyes wide with shock. Derek pulled me into a tight hug as tears streamed down my face. The man didn't die. He was taken to the hospital and later arrested. He had no ID, no known address. The police couldn't trace where he came from. But the part that still chills me, the part that never leaves my mind, was that he had a key, an exact copy of our back door key. My dad had sworn he changed all the locks when we moved in. We hadn't given a spare to anyone. No realtor, no neighbors, nobody. The police ran fingerprint scans, nothing. They asked my parents if they'd ever seen him before. They hadn't. The basement told the story. They found a sleeping bag, empty food wrappers, water bottles, and one crumpled McDonald's receipt dated 3 days before the incident, from the McDonald's where Janelle worked. He'd been living in our basement, eating our food, watching us, listening, waiting. How long? We'll never know. We moved out the following week. Janelle quit her job at McDonald's. None of us slept properly for months. To this day, I check every door, every lock. I never step near the basement without hesitation, and I refuse to walk past uncovered windows at night. But the thing I'll never forget, the thing I carry with me, is my mom. She didn't let me stab that man. She looked me dead in the eyes and took that weight herself. And I'm grateful. Even though I still have nightmares about the man with the key, at least I don't have blood on my hands. It started with fries and a dare. My name is Isaac, and this happened when I was 17. Early September had that weird in-between feeling. Warm enough that sweat clung to your back in the sun, yet a breeze in the shade whispered that summer was slipping away. I'd spent the morning at the Oak Ridge Youth Theater Club, rehearsing for a comedy showcase where parents laughed too loud, and half the audience didn't even get the jokes. By noon, our stomachs were growling. My friend Noah, loud, always grinning even when his jokes flopped, leaned over with that familiar mischievous sparkle in his eyes. "Bro, McDonald's run," he said. I shrugged. "Yeah, I'm starving." Neither of us had eaten all day, and the McDonald's on Riverbend Avenue was 10 minutes away. Close, cheap, fast. The kind of place you dream about when you're 17 and broke. We piled into Noah's old black Civic, windows stuck halfway down, music blasting too loud. I stuck my hand out the window, letting the wind slap against my palm. For a few minutes, the world's pressure lifted. No rehearsals, no college applications, no gas station shifts, just laughter and the hum of tires on asphalt. If only that sense of freedom had lasted. Pulling into the lot, everything looked normal. A few families were scattered at tables near the windows. A pickup truck was leaving the drive-thru. Nothing unusual. Inside, the air conditioning hit us like a wall. Noah groaned, flopping his head back dramatically. "Dude, this is heaven." We got in line. Two people stood ahead. An older man, balding, scowling like he'd been plucked from someone's grumpy grandfather montage, and a younger guy, mid-20s, dark hoodie, gray sweatpants, slides with socks. He carried a small white grocery bag and scrolled through his phone. Nothing about him screamed danger, yet my gut twisted as he glanced up again and again, scanning the restaurant instead of the menu or the cashier. That prickling sense, something's off, but I can't explain it. I leaned toward Noah. "You see that guy?" He followed my gaze, whispering, "What about him?" I couldn't explain it. My stomach nodded. The man stepped out of line, moving toward a side door near the dining area, one customers rarely used. He paused, looked back at us too long, then slipped outside. We moved forward, ordered our McChickens, fries, and drinks. Noah added a McFlurry, naturally. With tray in hand, he pointed to a corner booth near the side door. I hesitated. "You good?" Noah asked. "Yeah," I lied, forcing myself into the seat. I faced the parking lot. Noah had his back to it. As we unwrapped our burgers, I noticed a red bike propped against the building outside. It hadn't been there when we arrived. Then I froze. The man was back. Outside the window, standing unnervingly still, not looking at me but directly at Noah. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, the edges tinged yellow, wild and animal-like. The white bag was slung over his shoulder, and through the side of his hoodie a machete handle peeked out. I barely whispered, "Noah." "Don't look behind you." "What?" "There's a man outside." "Watching you. He's got a machete." Noah froze mid-bite, eyes wide. What do we do?" I don't know," I muttered, my voice shaking. We stayed rooted, hearts hammering. His breath fogged the glass. Then he moved, slowly, deliberately, circling the building as if he had all the time in the world. Moments later, he appeared at another window down the line, still watching, smiling, machete and bag in hand. My knees quivered. I stumbled to the counter, leaning close to a young employee, probably a college student. "Hey, there's a guy outside. He's armed, been watching us." The kid glanced up lazily. Okay, I'll tell my manager." I returned to Noah, chest pounding. "He's not doing anything." Wait," I whispered, and we sat there frozen as the world outside held its breath. "And stay calm." I told myself that over and over, even as my hands shook. Then an idea sparked. I pulled out my phone and held it up toward Noah, pretending to snap a picture of him. He caught on instantly, leaning in with that goofy grin, unaware of what I was really doing. I adjusted the angle, framing the man outside in the background. Click. I checked the screen. Perfect. There he was, pressed against the glass, machete handle visible through the side of his hoodie. Heart hammering, I got up and moved to a nearby table where a woman and her 2 kids were eating. I leaned close, voice low but urgent. "Ma'am, there's a man outside. He has a weapon. He's been watching us." Her eyes widened as she followed my gaze. She gasped and pulled the children closer to her, murmuring something I didn't catch. The tension rippled through the restaurant like a sudden gust of wind. I alerted a man at another table. He stood immediately, stepping back from the window. The air felt thick, almost electric. And then, he vanished again. I scanned every window. Nothing. My whisper was barely audible. Where'd he go? Noah's jaw tightened. Maybe he left. I didn't believe him. Something in my gut screamed that he hadn't gone far. I waited, counting the seconds, then pulled out my phone again and dialed 911. As soon as I hit call, movement caught my eye. He was back, emerging from behind the trash enclosure near the drive-thru, slowly heading toward the side door right next to our table. My chest dropped. Noah barely breathed. "Is he coming in?" "I don't know," I muttered. We froze, paralyzed, watching him approach. Then just a few feet from the door, he paused. One last look at the window where we sat, a slow, deliberate gaze that made my stomach twist. Without a word, he walked to the red bike, swung onto it, and pedaled away with that same casual, unnerving slowness, as if daring us to watch him go. He disappeared behind the hardware store next door, and only then could I inhale without my chest feeling like it would collapse. I stayed on the line with the dispatcher, describing every detail: the machete, his hoodie, the pictures I had taken. She thanked me, promised a patrol unit would arrive soon, and told us to stay put. Noah went to find the manager. It took showing the photo for them to take the situation seriously. We sat back down, scanning the parking lot. Every passing car a fresh jolt of fear. My fries had gone cold, my McChickens untouched. Finally, 12 minutes later, the police arrived. They took statements, examined the photo, and delivered the cold reality. He hadn't technically broken any laws. Brandishing a weapon or stepping inside would have changed everything, but technically nothing had. Still, they searched the area, warning us they'd ban him if they found him. They didn't. 20 minutes later, we were told it was likely safe to leave. We slid back into Noah's car in silence. After a long pause, he exhaled. "Dude, what the hell was that?" We laughed, but not because it was funny, because it was all we could do. It's been a year since that day. I'm 18 now. I still have that photo, shown to maybe 5 people. Every time I see it, the same sinking feeling hits. He wasn't aimlessly wandering. He wasn't just staring. He had a purpose. He was watching, waiting. If I hadn't called 911 when I did, if he had stepped inside, I don't even want to imagine it. Noah and I still joke sometimes, calling him the machete guy. But deep down, we both know we were dangerously close to something that day. Something real. Something terrifying. And the worst part? He's still out there. Watching. Waiting. Maybe someone else through another window, unaware of how close they are to him. I hadn't planned on going out that night. It was one of those early autumn Saturdays where the sky couldn't make up its mind. Half blue, half bruised with clouds threatening rain. The wind had a faint bite, like winter was testing its claws prematurely, and by 6 o'clock the daylight was already slinking away. My parents had driven up to Leeds to visit my Nan, who'd broken her hip the week before, leaving me home alone until probably midnight. They trusted me enough to hold down the fort. I was 16, responsible enough to babysit apparently, but still not grown up enough to slip out without the obligatory lecture. I was curled up on the sofa in my oldest hoodie and a pair of joggers, half watching a crime series on Netflix while scrolling through TikTok without really looking at anything. Bored wasn't the word. I felt gray, empty, restless, a dull ache in my chest that made doing literally anything seem better than the silence. That's when my phone buzzed. Tasha, fancy a cheeky Massey's? Benji's been nagging me for nuggets all day. Me? Can I be bothered? Kind of warm in bed. Ngil. Tasha, I'm already walking there. Don't make me sit with him alone. I laughed at her text, a short, bitter-sounding exhale, and then sat up. 2 blocks wasn't far, just past the Sainsbury's over the mini roundabout. The McDonald's on High Street was the closest in our little Yorkshire town of Wetherby. It wasn't rough. Mostly families, pensioners, and commuters passing through on the way to bigger cities. I dialed Mom. She answered on the second ring. "Everything all right?" she asked, her voice warm but sharp, the kind that pricked your nerves even when you hadn't done anything wrong. "Yeah," I said casually, trying for nonchalance. "Tasha and Benji are heading to Max's. Mind if I meet them?" There was a pause. "It's dark already," she said finally. "It's only 7, I countered. "And I've got pepper spray. I'll be fine." "You know I don't like you walking around alone after sunset," she pressed. "It's literally 2 streets away. I'll call when I get there and on my way back, I promised." Another pause, then a sigh. "Weird. All right, but keep your phone on and text me if anything seems off. By the time I got there, it was packed as usual. Little kids in school uniforms screamed across tables, delivery drivers shouted numbers at the collection counter, and a group of teens hogged the self-order screens, blasting music from a portable speaker. Tasha spotted me first, waving from the far corner near the window. Her little brother, Benji, was already halfway through a large fries, ketchup smeared across his cheek. Finally decided to join us? Tasha teased as I slid into the booth beside them. Yeah, took your time, she said with a grin. You're lucky I like you. We ordered Big Mac meal for me, McChicken for her, nuggets for Benji, and then dug in. For the first time all day, I wasn't thinking about how dull my weekend was. We joked, gossiped, laughed at the absurdity of school. Swear to God, Tasha said through a mouthful of chips. Another pop quiz on Monday. I'm going to scream. If Mr. Dawes gives us one, he's just bitter, I replied. No one showed up to his lunchtime chess club, I added, laughing. I showed up once, Benji piped up. You also threw up in the chess bin, Tasha reminded him, and we all erupted into laughter. I was full, maybe too full, having inhaled most of my fries before even starting the Big Mac. I picked it up and hesitated. Maybe save it for later. Midnight snack, maybe. That's when I noticed him. A man, clearly homeless, standing near the bin by the door. He looked about 60, maybe older, but life had carved deep lines into his face, made him look ancient. His clothes were crusted with mud, and his long gray beard hung in knotted strands. He shuffled slowly toward our table, each step heavy and deliberate. If you're not going to eat that, he rasped, pointing at my Big Mac, still in the box. Could I have it? His voice was rough, caught somewhere between gravel and phlegm, like a cough that had lived in him for decades. I blinked. I was going to take it home, actually. He didn't move closer, just held my gaze. There was no anger, only a kind of empty, hopeless pleading that made my stomach tighten. Tasha reached into her bag. We can get you something, she offered softly. I've got it, I said quickly, stopping her, then louder, more than I intended. Why don't you get a job instead of begging? His face fell. I wasn't even angry, I didn't know why I said it. Maybe the tension of the crowded room, maybe some need to appear tough, or maybe just cruelty I hadn't realized I possessed. I'm sorry, he muttered almost under his breath, stepping back as a McDonald's employee walked past. I seized the chance to flag her down. He's bothering us, I said. 2 minutes later, a security guard arrived. A young guy, maybe early 20s, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, but he approached the man cautiously, speaking in low, quiet tones, trying not to escalate things further. The man tried to speak, maybe to explain himself, but before we could even hear him, the security guard shoved him roughly by the arm and started dragging him toward the exit. We pressed our faces to the window, frozen as the old man stumbled on the uneven pavement outside. Then he fell, face first, hard. There was a sick crack as his mouth hit the curb. I saw a flash of red. A tooth, maybe. I flinched but didn't move. Tasha's eyes were wide as she stared at me. That was harsh, she whispered. He shouldn't have come to our table, I said defensively. My voice sounded hollow even to me. She didn't reply. We lingered inside for another hour. Benji got a McFlurry. Tasha and I joked about the upcoming school trip. The weird, heavy tension from earlier had mostly faded. When we finally got up to leave, Tasha offered to see me home. You coming with us? She asked. Dad's picking us up. He can drop me, I said, tugging my hoodie over my head. My mom's called me twice already. It's just 5 minutes, I'll walk. You sure? Positive, I said. We hugged and I waved at Benji as the sliding doors whooshed open behind me. The night was cool, quiet. The street almost empty, a few cars zipping past, a lone cyclist with a blinking rear light. I had one earbud in, music low, barely enough to keep the silence from swallowing me. Then something hit the back of my head with a sharp, brutal thud. A rock maybe, or something like it. I staggered forward, hands flying to the spot. My fingers came back wet. Blood. Pain throbbed deep in my skull. Dazed, I turned and froze. He was there. The old man. The same one from McDonald's, but now, something was different. He hunched near a lamppost, his mouth bloody, a tooth missing. His eyes burned, not sad, not pleading, but twisted. Something dark. I stepped back. Hey, what the hell? He didn't answer. And then he ran. Faster than I thought possible. faster than a man that age should move. He grabbed me by the shoulders and shook me violently. "Help! Somebody help me!" I screamed, my voice cracking. My knees buckled. I could smell him, sour sweat, rot, stale beer. His spit landed on my face as he screamed something incomprehensible. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." "Please stop," I whimpered. He shoved me hard. I hit the pavement, palms scraping against the rough concrete. I scrambled backward, crawling, tears blurring my vision. And then he stopped. Not chasing, not moving, just watching. And laughing. A dry, rasping laugh that cut through the night like nails on a chalkboard. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I burst through the front door, bolted it behind me, and collapsed in the hallway. Sobbing, hyperventilating, covered in sweat, dirt, and blood from the back of my head, I called my mom. I couldn't even form a full sentence. Just broken, terrified words. They drove back immediately, I remember later. Took nearly an hour. I sat curled in the corner of the living room the whole time, staring at the window, expecting him to appear, grinning with that bloody, jagged mouth. He didn't. The police came later that night. I gave a statement. They took me to the hospital for a scan. Mild concussion. No stitches needed. They never found him. 14 years later, I'm 30 now, living in London. I've got a steady job, a partner, a flat of my own. And still, every time I see someone homeless, a shiver goes through me. A memory, a warning, a lesson. I offer them food now. Always, sometimes cash, sometimes a hot coffee. Not out of sainthood, but because I remember. How one careless, cruel sentence turned a hungry man into something else. Something monstrous. And every time I walk past someone sleeping rough, I wonder, what if I had just given him the burger? I never really liked clowns. Not as a kid, and certainly not now after everything that happened. I grew up in Henderson Valley, a sleepy town about 20 minutes outside Milwaukee. Quiet, unremarkable, the kind of place where everyone knows your name if you've worked at the same gas station or diner long enough. People start thinking of you as part of the furniture. I floundered after community college didn't pan out, taking whatever job I could. Eventually, I landed at Denny's Grill Spot, our town's sad little knockoff of McDonald's. About 6 months into working there, the manager pulled me aside. "Hey, Jack, you ever thought about playing Danny the Griller?" he asked, grinning. I blinked. Danny the Griller? You know, our version of Ronald McDonald. Birthday parties, weekend events. The old guy quit. I was tall, skinny, and desperate for overtime. I hated the idea, but after rent, groceries, and gas, I couldn't say no. So that's how I became a clown. Red wig, yellow jumpsuit, oversized shoes, painted on grin that felt less like a smile and more like a permanent mask. I spent weekends outside the drive-thru, waving at cars, handing out balloons. Most kids either laughed or ran screaming. The job was awkward, suffocating, and humiliating, but it paid. I was used to being laughed at. High school had been a minefield. Never the popular kid, never the jock, just Jack Turner, the quiet kid doodling comics in the back of the room. I thought life would change after graduation. It didn't. Real life has a way of smashing illusions, and there I was, 23, dressed as a clown, shivering in October's chill, trying to make balloon animals for strangers. That night, everything went wrong. Thursday. Just cold enough to make your fingers ache if you didn't have gloves. The store closed at 10. It was 9:50. The lobby was empty, the drive-thru quiet. I hadn't sat in 4 hours, hadn't even gone to the bathroom. I told Rachel, my coworker at the counter, "Be right back." She nodded, buried in paperwork. By the time I returned, the lobby was still empty, but Rachel looked off, pale, uneasy. "Hey," she whispered. "Yeah?" "Some woman came in, asking for you." I was adjusting my red wig, trying to roll my shoulders free of tension. "Me?" "Yeah." Said she was looking for the clown, Danny. I shrugged. Probably some last-minute mom wanting a picture. I barely hit an eye roll. "Where is she?" Rachel pointed toward the exit. "Out there. Been standing a while." I expected a tired mom, a cranky kid tugging at her sleeve. What I saw instead made my stomach knot. She was just beyond the glass doors. Thin, maybe late 40s, wearing a threadbare cardigan with holes in the sleeves. Her back was rigid, staring straight up at the sky like she'd spotted something spectacular. Her stillness, her posture, it didn't feel right. I cleared my throat. "Ma'am, you were looking for me?" She turned slowly, almost painfully. When our eyes met, a chill ran through me. Her eyes were too wide, her pupils unfocused. She blinked, once, twice. Then her voice, soft but strange, pierced the quiet. "My son. He wanted a photo with you. He loves Danny." I glanced around the empty lot. Where is he?" She hesitated as if the question confused her. "Who?" "Your son." A shadow flickered across her face. The smile faltered. "Oh, he's sick. Couldn't come, but if you'd come with me, he's waiting. Just a quick photo. I'll pay you." Her tone didn't sit right, but I was behind on rent. Payday wasn't for another few days. My stomach twisted with indecision, but then she added, "I'll give you $50. I nodded, reluctant. "Okay, let me grab my things." Inside, I clocked out, told Rachel I had a last-minute side gig. She squinted, unconvinced. "You sure?" "Yeah. It'll be quick," I said. I hoped she believed me. We walked together through Henderson Valley, past the closed post office, past the little library. Houses thinned. Her footsteps were silent. Mine bounced against the empty streets. She didn't speak once. 10 minutes in, I realized we weren't heading toward the familiar residential blocks. We were leaving town. The sidewalk ended. Now we walked on gravel. I felt the unease coil in my stomach like a living thing, every step echoing in the quiet night. "Where exactly do you live?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She stopped and turned, blinking slowly like my question had caught her off guard. "I don't," she said simply. I frowned. "Then where's your son?" Her smile snapped back, sudden and eerie, like a switch had been flipped. "He's waiting at the cemetery." My stomach sank. I halted mid-step. "The cemetery?" "Yes, just ahead," she said, stepping forward again. I swallowed hard. "You said he was sick?" "Not gone." She didn't answer, just kept walking, as if the words had never reached her. My mind raced. I considered turning back. She was small, maybe 5'5", probably under 100 pounds, and I was 23, not defenseless. But the cash, the overdue rent, and a strange, foolish part of me thought, maybe she just needs help. The cemetery gate loomed ahead, rusted and squealing in protest as she pushed it open. Wind stirred through the bare trees, their branches rattling together like whispers. She moved swiftly, now certain, purposeful. We stopped at a small headstone near the back fence. Compared to the others, it looked cared for. Freshly washed, adorned with toys and plastic flowers. The name read, Michael Tanner, 2014-2021. I froze. "Our little comedian," she said softly, voice trembling, always smiling. "My son, he loved jokes. Will you tell him one?" I stared at her. The painted grin on my face suddenly felt grotesque, suffocating. She waited, expectant, a quiet plea in her wide, unblinking eyes. Tears glistened at the corners, though none fell. It was easier to comply. I forced a small joke, something about a burger and a milkshake. Silence. Then a giggle. Soft, fleeting. A child's laugh. My knees went weak. She turned to me, that doll-like stare fixed, and she laughed too, a high, mimicking sound that bounced off the headstones, filling the air like a mocking echo. I think I need to go," I stammered. She kept laughing. Then her expression dropped, cold, insistent. "Wait, Michael wants a picture." "No," I said quickly, shaking my head. I'm sorry. I have to go now." "Wait," she cried, grabbing my sleeve. "He's not done. He's not ready." I yanked my arm free. Her voice followed me as I backed away into the darkened rows of stones. Every child wants a photo with Danny the Griller, don't they? I didn't run. My legs pumped hard, my oversized clown shoes tripping me twice. I didn't look back until I reached the main road. She was gone. I quit 2 days later. I couldn't bear the wig, the costume, the mask of that painted smile. Rachel said the woman never returned, but I kept expecting her at the drive-thru outside my apartment just beyond my sight. Some nights I would wake, heart pounding, and hear a faint giggle in the darkness just once, always soft, fleeting. 3 months later, the town paper ran a story. Grieving mother arrested after a series of harassment reports near Henderson Cemetery. The article named Marilyn Tanner, whose son Michael had died 2 years prior in a biking accident. She had been seen multiple times near fast food restaurants, trying to convince workers to meet her son. Some had followed her. Most walked away. No one reported it until a teen at Dairy Den told his manager. The final line made my chest tighten. Authorities found several photos near the boy's grave. Most were water damaged, but one remained intact. A man in a red wig and yellow costume stood beside the headstone, staring straight at the camera. His face was painted in a smile, but his eyes, full of fear. I never took that photo, or at least I don't remember taking it, but I saw it. It was me, Danny the Griller, holding a balloon next to a grave, and just behind me, barely visible, a small shadow of a child smiling. It was supposed to be an easy shift. That's what I kept telling myself over and over like a mantra. I was 18, fresh out of high school, and my name's Alina. Back in 2009, I worked part-time at the McDonald's on the edge of Bramblewood, a quiet town tucked between sprawling farmland and thick pine forests in northern Oregon. The place wasn't busy most nights. Half our customers were long-haul truckers who'd pulled off the state highway, the other half locals who practically lived off the dollar menu. That night, mid-November, it was bone-chilling cold, the kind of cold that made your nose sting the moment you stepped outside. Inside, the heat hummed softly, mingling with the smell of fryer oil and cheap coffee that clung to everything, from the counters to the yellow plastic trays. It was a closing shift, meaning I'd be stuck there from 4 p.m. until midnight. I remember that evening clearly because it started so normally. My mom had dropped me off early. We only had one car and she needed it for her second job cleaning offices downtown. I didn't mind. It gave me a few quiet hours to work on college applications in the break room and eat a filet-o-fish in peace before the dinner rush. My manager that night was Carla, 26, sharp as a tack, no nonsense. The kind of woman who could quiet a full lobby with just a glare. Jamal was in the kitchen, always humming Drake songs off-key, and Rita handled the drive-thru like she was born with a headset permanently glued to her ear. I mention them because later, they were the only ones who even noticed what I was about to see. Around 8:15 p.m., things started to feel off. After 8, Bramblewood's McDonald's was almost always dead. That night, there were maybe 2 tables in use. A young couple with a screaming toddler and an elderly man who treated his plain cheeseburger like a delicacy. I was wiping down the ketchup station when the door creaked open. 2 women walked in. That alone wasn't strange, but everything about them screamed wrong. They wore long black dresses straight out of a Victorian drama, high collars, lace sleeves, hems brushing the floor. One had her hair in a tight bun, the other a braid slung over her shoulder. Their skin was ghostly pale, powdery like paper, and their eyes were dark, almost hollow. They didn't speak a word. I glanced at Carla, expecting her to greet them or hand them a menu. But she froze, her expression unreadable. Hi? Welcome to McDonald's, I stammered, unsure if they were part of some performance or just eccentric tourists. The woman with the bun tilted her head slowly. They glided further inside rather than walked. And that's when I noticed it. They made no sound. No scuff, no tap, nothing. Carla finally forced a smile. Come on in. It's cold out, she said, her voice tight. You 2 need a minute to decide? Still no response. They stood by the entrance, staring past us, past the counter, past the soda machines like they were seeing something on a plane of reality I couldn't reach. Jamal peeked from the kitchen window, joking. Yo, who let the Victorian ghosts in? Rita snorted through her headset. They look like they just walked out of a funeral in 1890, she whispered to me. I tried to brush it off. Maybe they were headed to a play, or one of those historical reenactments. But they didn't order anything, they just stood there, statues in black lace. That's when the toddler started screaming. Not crying, screaming. He pointed directly at the women writhing in his high chair like he was trying to escape his own skin. They're wrong. They're wrong, he howled. His mother snatched him up and his father squinted at the women, uneasy. Y'all need help or something, he asked. Still nothing. Then finally the woman with the braid spoke, but not to him. She looked at me. Her voice was unnervingly calm, smooth, like she was reading a script. Is the manager present? Carla stepped forward, her jaw tight, unease written across her face. That would be me. What's going on? The woman smiled. We've come to collect what was promised. What does that mean? Carla asked, confusion creeping into her voice. Insurance? Something else? The woman with the bun added nothing. But then they both turned at exactly the same moment toward the back hallway, the one that led to the old party room. The party room had been sealed for over a year. Moldy walls, warped floors from a leaky roof, and a layer of dust thick enough to leave footprints. Corporate never fixed it, never reopened it. Yet there they were, staring straight at that door as if they were expecting it to open. I felt my stomach drop. Something about the way they moved, how they looked past us, made the air feel heavier. My chest tightened like the room had shrunk around us, and I realized that this night, the one I'd thought would be easy, was anything but ordinary. The two women glided toward the hallway, still making not a single sound. That's when Carla finally yelled, her voice sharp enough to cut through the quiet. Hey! That's off limits. They didn't slow down. Not a twitch. Not a pause. They passed right by me, and I swear the air dropped like someone had opened a freezer. The ketchup packets I was holding stiffened in my hands like frozen blocks of plastic. My heart pounded. I followed almost automatically with Carla and Jamal behind me, and I wished to God we hadn't. They stopped in front of the party room door, the old, heavy padlock still in place. Then, without touching the handle, without a key, the lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside was darkness so thick it felt solid, only broken by a flickering overhead light that cast the room in stuttering shadows. No footprints marked the dust-covered floor, yet somehow they walked inside like it was perfectly natural. Carla and I peeked in cautiously, and I heard Jamal's whispered voice behind us. Y'all see that? The old birthday mural, the one with faded balloons and Ronald McDonald, was shredded, like something had clawed through it with frantic, desperate hands. At the far end of the room, the two women stood facing each other by the wall, completely still. Then, they vanished, not in smoke, not in light, just gone, as if they'd never existed. Carla's body shook visibly. She pulled out her phone and called the district manager, her voice tight and trembling. We closed early, locking every door and window. I stayed behind because I was too terrified to walk home alone. Rita, annoyed but equally unsettled, suddenly gasped. Wait, those dresses, those exact ones, I've seen them before. She disappeared into the storage closet and came back with a cardboard box labeled History. Inside were old black and white and yellowing photographs. And there they were, two women, arm in arm, one smiling, one frowning, wearing those exact dresses. The photo's caption read, McDonald's opening day 1912 staff guests. That makes no sense, Jamal muttered. This McDonald's was built in the 80s. Carla paled. The franchise, yes. But this lot, this land had a history. She quickly pulled up parcel records on her phone. The McDonald's sat atop the remains of a hotel that burned down in 1912. Two sisters died inside, Eleanor and Constance Blythe. An article detailed a tragic insurance dispute. They had been denied a claim by the hotel's owner and perished after locking themselves in the ballroom. That ballroom was now our party room. That night I barely slept. My cousin was visiting, and I must have looked like a ghost because he kept asking if I was okay. Around 3:38 a.m. I woke to him standing at the window staring silently outside. They're back, he whispered. I ran to the window, heart thudding, but saw nothing. Who? He just pointed, his finger trembling. The women. They're here again. I asked him if they had come inside. He shook his head. Even in his half-sleep, his face was pale, and the chill he described ran down my spine. He had never heard my story, not a word, yet somehow knew what I had lived through. The next day I called Carla. She admitted she'd dreamed of them that night. In her dreams they asked again, their voices soft and insistent, "Where is what was promised?" 3 days later, the district manager came down in person. The mural was stripped, everything removed from the party room, and the door was sealed with solid steel. It remains locked to this day. A year later, I had left McDonald's, gone to college, tried to move on. But sometimes I still dream of that icy air, that soft, eerie voice. I looked the sisters up online once more, finding a blurry obituary. Eleanor and Constance Blythe. They had taken out an insurance policy on the hotel, but the company never paid, thanks to the owner, Richard Hart. Decades later, the land was leased to McDonald's by the same Hart family, the same bloodline, the same betrayal, and maybe, just maybe, the sisters were never after me. They were after what was promised. Some debts don't expire, not even in death. I had always been the fun uncle in the family, the one who let rules slide just enough to be cool. Video game marathons, soda before dinner, staying up way past bedtime to watch every superhero movie that came out. My sister Monica was the exact opposite. She ran her life and Alex's with military precision. Single mom, high-pressure sales job, every bedtime strictly enforced, screen time rationed like currency. Her son Alex, 11, was bright, thoughtful, and polite to the point of being self-conscious. When Monica called last week, asking if I could watch him while she flew to Dallas for a 5-day corporate training, I didn't hesitate. I was on summer break from teaching high school history, and honestly, I'd miss the kid. The week we had together was everything I remembered. Arcade trips, superhero flicks, late-night switch battles, fries and milkshakes in messy, laughing chaos. On our last day, Friday, I promised we'd grab burgers before Monica picked him up at the airport. "Can we go to McDonald's?" Alex asked, practically bouncing. "Sure," I said. "You want a Happy Meal like old times?" "Only if it comes with a toy," I smiled. "That's my kid." We drove a few miles to a McDonald's in Greystone, New Hampshire. Not one of the new shiny ones, but Alex loved it. He said the cracked faux leather booths and flickering fluorescent lights felt more real. It was crowded for 3:30 p.m. on a weekday, packed with kids from school just letting out, parents corralling them, and a few older folks sipping coffee in silence. We stood in line, ordered 2 quarter-pounders, large fries, a Happy Meal with apple slices and a chocolate milk. I grabbed the tray, scanning for an empty table when Alex tugged on my sleeve. "There," he said, pointing. I squinted. The booth looked empty, but not really. A man sat on one side, sipping a small coffee. Middle-aged, pale, wearing a beige raincoat despite the week's dry weather. A long, glossy red line ran down his right cheek, a fresh cut that drew my eye immediately. "He's sitting there," I said, hesitating. "Just on one side," Alex said. "There's room." I paused, but the man glanced up, offering a small nod. "Go ahead," he said quietly. "Plenty of space." So we sat. I took the seat beside Alex across from the man. We dug in. Alex tore open his Happy Meal like he had 5 years ago, his excitement infectious. "Let's see what toy you got," I said. A yellow minion popped out, the kind that spins if you press its head. The man leaned in slightly, eyes lighting up. "I remember these," he said. "They used to be better, more detailed. Back then each one was unique." Alex frowned. "Why did they stop making those?" The man's smile widened, just a little too much. "Some people thought they were wrong." "Wrong how?" Alex asked, curiosity high in his voice. I sipped my Coke, assuming he meant safety issues, choking hazards, paint, but the man's next move made my stomach twist. He slid a hand into his coat pocket, fingers wrestling with something inside. A faint crinkle came from the bag, thick paper or plastic. "Let me show you," he muttered, leaning closer, as if we were sharing a secret. Alex leaned forward eagerly. "What is it?" he asked. The man withdrew a crumpled brown paper bag like something you'd get at a street vendor and placed it carefully on the table. He set it down with a reverence that made my gut tighten. "Check this out," he said. He pulled out a toy, but not the kind you'd expect in a Happy Meal. About the size of a softball, shaped like a jellyfish, its translucent dome shimmered like soap film. Droopy, rubbery tentacles hung below, and it had a face, human-like, staring with blank, glassy eyes. Its grid-like mouth looked stitched on, but not cartoonish, more like someone had drawn it on skin. Alex recoiled slightly. "What? That's weird." The man beamed. "Isn't it amazing? Go ahead, touch it. The textures, like nothing else." My heart raced. Something in the way he said it carried an almost hypnotic weight, subtle but undeniable. I put my hand on Alex's shoulder. "Hey, bud, don't touch that." The man tilted his head, his grin unshaken. "It's just a toy. Kids love toys." I met his eyes directly. "He doesn't need to touch anything that came out of your pocket." The man's smile didn't fade, but there was a strange glint in his eyes. Something unspoken, heavy, and wrong. Alex shivered beside me, half curious, half afraid, and I knew then that this wasn't going to be just another casual lunch. "You think I'm dangerous?" he asked, more amused than offended, leaning back just slightly like he was testing me. I think you need to leave, I said, low and firm. Right now. He leaned forward across the table, so close I could smell the faint stale peppermint on his breath. What are you going to do? He murmured, almost a taunt. Ban me from McDonald's? I clenched my fists, my heart hammering. I was ready to stand, ready to swing if I had to, but he moved first. Slowly, deliberately, he gathered his jellyfish toy, still in the crumpled paper bag. No rush, no panic, just this sick, calculated calm that made my stomach twist. As he walked past, he glanced over his shoulder. Some toys stick with you, he said softly, even when you grow up. Alex and I didn't touch our food. I packed it into the to-go boxes, telling him we'd eat in the car. Uncle Mason, he whispered as we got up. That guy was scary. I know, buddy, I said, resting a hand on his shoulder. He's gone. Let's go. At the counter, I told the manager, a bored-looking college kid, about the man and his behavior. The guy shrugged, bored. Creeps are everywhere, man. He didn't do anything wrong. Wrong? I snapped. He showed a kid a messed-up toy and told him to touch it. The manager shook his head. He didn't touch the boy. Creepy, sure. Criminal, not really. I didn't answer. I shoved the boxes into the car, buckled Alex in, and started the engine. As I shifted into drive, a shadow fell across the driver's side window. A slam shook the glass. It was him. His hand flat against the window, eyes unblinking. Alex gasped. A high, terrified sound that made my chest tighten. I reached for my phone, dialing 911, but froze. The man slowly raised the paper bag, pulling out the jellyfish toy. He held it to his tongue, dragging it up from bottom to top, licking it in a deliberate, grotesque ritual. Alex shrieked, tears spilling down his cheeks. Get the hell away from us! I shouted, yanking the car into reverse. Tires squealed against asphalt as we peeled out of the parking lot. That night, Alex barely spoke. I tucked him onto the couch, a blanket pulled tight around him, turning on a movie for background noise, but he didn't watch. His eyes kept darting to the window, imagining the man waiting outside. I stayed up, listening for any sound, the crunch of footsteps, a shadow sliding past, but there was nothing. No sign of him, only the image of that calm, cruel face etched into my mind. In the morning, I drove Alex to the airport. Monica met us, and while Alex didn't say a word, I pulled her aside and told her everything. Later, I reported the incident to the Greystone police. He didn't touch the boy or threaten you, one officer said politely. Creepy, yes. Criminal, not really. He followed us, I insisted, licked a toy in front of him. He was targeting us. Could have been a prank, the officer said. People are weird. They took a statement and that was it. A few days later, Monica called. Alex is still scared, she said. He asked me if jellyfish live in people's pockets. My stomach sank. I'm sorry, she said. I should have seen the signs earlier. It's not your fault, she added. Something sick, but not your fault. I don't know what that toy was. Custom made, haunted, some twisted art, but I do know this. I've driven back to that McDonald's, sat in the same booth, watched the people come and go. No sign of him. But sometimes, just sometimes, I see a kid walking out with a Happy Meal, a toy that looks a little too detailed, a little too strange. I don't know who that man was or where he got that toy. I only know what I felt that day. And if you ever see a jellyfish with a human face in a paper bag, don't touch it. Don't let your kid touch it. Just leave. I was 10 years old when it happened. Back then, I lived in East Los Angeles in a house that felt permanently overcrowded, with my parents, my two younger siblings, my cousin Leo, and my Uncle Rudy all packed under the same roof. The walls seemed to hum with the weight of bodies, voices, and the smell of old cooking. Our neighborhood was old too. Sidewalks cracked and buckled from roots that pushed through the concrete, stray dogs wandering the alleys like they owned the place, and the faint smell of exhaust that never really went away. Nothing ever really felt new, even when it was. Leo was 13, the older cousin everyone looked up to. He had that reckless confidence, that I know better than everyone else swagger that made me believe every word he said. If Leo told me something was safe, I believed it. If he told me to jump, I jumped without thinking. I idolized him in the way little cousins do, blindly. It was a Saturday in late July. the kind of sticky summer afternoon where the air sticks to your skin, and time feels slow and heavy. We'd been holed up in the living room for hours playing Smash Brothers until the power flickered, and Uncle Rudy yelled from the kitchen, "Get outside before your eyeballs fry in here." We obeyed without question. "Let's go to the McDonald's on Hillrest," Leo suggested as we stepped into the blistering heat. It was only about 10 blocks away, but it felt like a pilgrimage. The place had just reopened after renovations. New booths, new soda machines, air conditioning that felt like heaven compared to our sweltering house. "Come on," Leo said, fishing a few crumpled bills from his wallet. "We'll get a burger and split a sundae or something." I didn't care what we ate. I just wanted out of the house, away from the heat, the noise, and the boredom. We took the back streets, hopping low fences, cutting through yards. This was just how we got around. That's when we passed it, the warehouse. Hard to miss. Its chain-link fence sagged and leaned, covered in graffiti. The building itself half collapsed. It looked like something the world had forgotten. People said it used to be a textile factory in the 60s, then maybe a recycling plant, and after that no one really knew. But everyone had a story. "Don't look at it too long," Leo muttered as we walked past. I laughed. "That place is cursed?" "You're just saying that." He didn't laugh. Not like me. His eyes lingered on the building, serious, almost wary. "No, for real. Back in the 90s, 2 kids dared each other to spend the night there. Never came out. Cops found their bikes outside. Nothing else. Not even sleeping bags. They check inside? They tried, but something happened to the one who went in." He glanced back at the warehouse like it could hear us. They say he tore out his own tongue. Came out screaming, never spoke again. I went silent after that. The heat suddenly heavier, the world narrower around me. We made it to McDonald's, ordered 1 cheeseburger meal and a hot fudge sundae to share, and carried our tray to the window seats. I remember taking a bite of that burger, the taste somehow perfect after the oppressive heat and fear. Then I saw it. At first, it was just a flicker in the broken window of the warehouse, a shadow shifting across shattered glass. I blinked, thought maybe it was a bird, a trick of the sun, heat waves rising from the asphalt. But then it moved again, and this time I knew it was watching us. "Leo," I whispered, "look." He leaned forward, squinting. "What the hell?" There were 2 figures side by side, standing perfectly still. They weren't human, not completely. Their torsos were bloated and round as if swollen from some disease, their skin cracked and leathery like burnt rubber, their backs curved outward in jagged humps like broken shells. And their eyes, God, their eyes glowed red, pulsing like dying embers. Their mouths hung open in wide, jagged slits like someone had carved a snapping turtle's jaw into a skull. I froze. My hands clutched the tray so tight my knuckles ached. Leo's jaw tightened beside me, silent now. And for the first time I felt the cold, creeping weight of fear like it was sliding under my skin. And they were just standing there, watching. They didn't move. Not a twitch, not a blink. Just stood there, frozen, staring straight at us. Then one of them smiled, a slow, grotesque curl of its jagged mouth. That was it. I dropped my burger without thinking. The tray clattered to the floor, fries scattering, and a cold knot formed in my stomach. "Shit," Leo cursed, grabbing my arm and yanking me back from the window. "Come on, now, we're leaving." We started walking fast, almost running, our legs heavy, our lungs tight, but neither of us spoke until we had turned the corner and the warehouse was out of sight. I felt cold, not just scared, but like a sickness had crawled through me, like the air itself had changed, heavier, sharper. "You saw it too, right?" My voice barely reached above a whisper. Leo nodded, his face pale. "Yeah, I saw them. We didn't go back to McDonald's that summer." Years passed. I turned 15, then 18. Moved out, went to college. Found work at a small auto shop in Glendale. But I never forgot those glowing red eyes. I never forgot that impossible feeling of being watched by something not entirely human. Sometimes I thought about going back, just to see if the place had been torn down or boarded up. But I never did. Not until last year. It was Thanksgiving. I was back in East LA visiting family. Uncle Rudy had passed and we were all gathered at Grandma Rose's house. She was getting old, her memory fading, but she still loved to talk, filling quiet spaces with stories from decades past. After dinner, she stepped out onto the porch with a cigarette, leaning back and staring down the road as smoke curled into the night. You remember that old warehouse by the McDonald's? She asked casually. My heart skipped. Yeah, I said, my throat tight. They used to say it was cursed. You know why? I shook my head. She exhaled slowly, letting the smoke hang in the air. 2 men hanged themselves inside right after they opened the plant. Brothers, immigrants, worked long hours, barely paid. One day they just snapped. Left a note on the wall, not written in ink. What do you mean? It looked like blood, she said, her voice trembling slightly, thick and heavy, almost like tar. She flicked ash onto the cracked pavement. No one bought the place after that, not even for storage. And you know what else? Her eyes softened, distant. Sometimes people said they saw them in the windows, just staring. I didn't say a word. I didn't tell her I had seen them too, that Leo and I hadn't been imagining it, because deep down I already knew. That night I went home and dug out my old sketchbook. Hidden behind years of doodles and homework notes on the last page was a pencil drawing I had made when I was 10. The warehouse, the 2 figures, their cracked, grotesque torsos, their glowing red eyes, their wide, jagged mouths, every line traced from memory, not imagination. I hadn't seen them since, but sometimes when I drive through East LA at night, I keep my windows rolled up, clutching the wheel a little tighter because I swear I can still feel them watching, and part of me knows that one day they might not stay behind the glass. I don't know if what I saw was real, or if it was just the imagination of a child trying to make sense of things no child should ever have to face. But the fear itself was real. Even now, more than 20 years later, my stomach still tightens into a strange, hollow ache whenever I hear the word peekaboo. I was 4 years old when it began. My name is Ivy, and I grew up in Brook Hollow, Georgia, a quiet little town where nothing ever happened. Until it did. My mom always said I was a sensitive child, sensitive to sounds, textures, shadows, sensitive in a way that made normal life feel like it was layered in static and noise. I had night terrors, vivid dreams, and a habit of talking to empty corners as if someone were listening. My dad wasn't around much. He worked late shifts at a lumber yard and mostly came home just to sleep. My mom and older brother Simon, though, they remembered everything. They told me trauma can do strange things to a child's brain. But I swear what I experienced wasn't just trauma. It was something else entirely. It started in the spring of 2005. Mom had begun working nights at a hospital trying to make ends meet, which left evenings chaotic and hurried. Usually she would drop me off at the McDonald's on Elmwood Avenue while Simon finished his tutoring next door. At the time, it was normal in our town for parents to leave kids in the play place for an hour or 2. Staff watched through the big glass windows, and the restaurant had the kind of familiarity that was supposed to feel safe. But there was always something wrong about that McDonald's. I didn't have the words for it then, but even as a toddler I could sense it. The air felt thick, heavy, like it pressed down on your chest with the weight of water-soaked blankets. The play place was darker than it had any right to be, even in daylight, as if sunlight refused to enter. The tunnels would creak when no one was inside. The ball pit would ripple as if something had just slid beneath the surface. I remember the first time I saw him. It was a rainy afternoon, the sky bruised and muddy, thunder splitting the clouds above as Simon helped me out of the car. "Just stay in the play place, okay?" he said, brushing water off my jacket. "I'll be next door. Don't talk to strangers." I nodded, half eager to run, half nervous. "Okay," I whispered. The place was nearly empty. A bored teenager behind the counter gave a weak smile before returning to the fryer. I kicked off my shoes and crawled into the structure. The familiar red spirals fogged over windows and worn fabric mats that smelled faintly of old plastic and grease. I was halfway through the tunnel when I heard it. A voice. Pick. A sharp, high-pitched squeal like a squeaky toy buzzing with static. My body froze. I looked behind me. Nothing. "Pick-a-boo," it whispered again, softer this time. The sound came from the very end of the tunnel, where darkness pooled like ink. I held my breath, heart hammering. Something shifted in the shadows, and then I saw it. A face. Pale, thin, smeared with grime. Ragged tufts of hair stuck out in all directions like dead moss or a squirrel's nest. Its eyes were grotesquely large, cartoonish, almost painted on. It didn't crawl. It snapped forward, face first, like some invisible string yanked it toward me. I screamed, tumbling backward, my elbow smacking the plastic wall as I slid down the slide. The teenager behind the counter didn't even look up. Simon arrived a few minutes later, breathless. I was curled up under a table, sobbing, repeating the same word over and over. Peekaboo, peekaboo. That was only the beginning. Mom took me to a child psychologist shortly after. She thought the divorce might be affecting me. Dad had officially moved out and we were splitting time between houses. But every time I stayed at Mom's, especially after a visit to that McDonald's, I'd wake up screaming. Sometimes my arms were scratched raw. Once my nose bled so badly the sheets looked like something from a crime scene. I tried to explain to the therapist about him, the figure in the tunnels. Peekaboo, I said. He only comes when I'm alone. He lives in tunnels and doorways. He whispers pick until I answer. The therapist wrote it off as an imaginary friend born from trauma and gave Mom a list of bedtime rituals and calming exercises. None of it worked. Not even a little. Worse, I started doing things I don't even remember. Mom and Simon say that whenever we drove past an empty house, I'd whisper, "That's where Peekaboo lives now." Or I'd ring random doorbells and say, "Peekaboo will open the door." I have no memory of it, no recollection at all, but they swore it happened. One night, though I remember everything like it's burned into my mind, Mom let me sleep in the master bedroom while she folded laundry in the living room. I'd been crying for hours, terrified after seeing Peekaboo in the hallway again. She promised to leave the bathroom light on so I wouldn't be scared, but the light didn't matter. I lay there staring at the bathroom door when I felt the air shift. The room went icy, though it was midsummer. The soft hum of the fridge, the dryer, the ceiling fan, even the creaks of the house all faded into a silence so thick it hurt my ears. And then I saw him standing in the doorway, same ragged clothes, same twitchy hands jerking like invisible strings pulled him. But this time he smiled. It was wide. Wrongly wide. Human, but twisted in a way that made your stomach turn. "Peekaboo," he whispered. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. And then he lunged at me, arms flailing, mouth open like he intended to swallow me whole. That's when I finally screamed, and my voice must have carried because the neighbors called the police. Mom ran in, finding me curled at the edge of the bed, shaking uncontrollably. She rushed me to the hospital thinking it was a seizure, but it wasn't. Things calmed down eventually. After we moved, leaving that house behind, we left the McDonald's on Elmwood too. We went to a newer, cleaner location, one without a play place. I stopped seeing Peekaboo. The nightmares faded, the scratches disappeared, but the fear never left me. When I was 10, I asked Mom about the old house, the play place, the strange noises I used to think came from under my bed. She looked at me seriously, more seriously than I'd ever seen. "That house, Ivy," she said, her voice low. "That house wasn't right." I used to hear things too, something breathing beneath the floor, sometimes moaning, sometimes growling. It wasn't just you. I asked her if she ever saw Peekaboo. She didn't answer at first, but finally, after a long pause, she nodded. "One time," she whispered. "Just once. I saw something standing in the hallway after midnight. I thought it was you, but it wasn't. I closed my eyes and prayed. When I looked again, it was gone." She paused, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes. I haven't been able to walk past a McDonald's play place without feeling sick since then. Last year I went back. I'm in my 20s now, and a part of me, a morbid curiosity I guess, wanted to see it again. The McDonald's was still there, slightly run down. The play place looked smaller now, faded by sun and time. But the moment I stepped inside, that weight returned, heavy and watching. I bought a small coffee and sat by the window, trying to convince myself it was just memory, just nerves. Then I heard it, muffled, high-pitched, scratchy from the plastic tunnel. "Pick." I didn't stay. I don't know what Peekaboo is. A ghost, a hallucination, a parasite feeding on grief in a broken family? Maybe some places, play places meant for laughter, hide shadows we aren't supposed to see. All I know is this. If you ever hear a voice in a tunnel whispering, "Pick," don't answer. Because he never really leaves. He's just waiting for someone new to play. I used to think our house at 34 Hawthorne Street was safe, that my mom, Jessica, was just careful. My name's Max Winslow, and when I was 10, I didn't realize how fear could twist love into something that felt like a cage. Mom had always been a nurse, precise, neat. The kind of person who washed her hands twice even after wearing gloves. But after that minor car accident a few years back, something in her changed. Her fear grew teeth. She stopped going out alone, stopped trusting anyone she didn't know, and little by little, she started treating me like I was something fragile, something that could break if she blinked too long. The backyard became the only place I could breathe. Even then, it wasn't really mine. She'd chain the gate every morning, double lock it and hover by the kitchen window, her reflection ghosting over the glass. I'd ride my bike in slow circles, pretending to explore, but I always felt her watching. Every car that passed, every neighbor who waved, every barking dog, in her mind they were all potential threats. "Don't talk to strangers, Max," she shouted one afternoon when I waved at Mr. Perkins, the mailman. Her voice shook as if the words were holding back something bigger, a panic that never left her. At first I told myself she was just being protective, but soon her protection turned into commandments. No sleepovers, no playdates, no unsupervised calls. Anytime I tried to reach out or to have something that was mine, she saw it as betrayal. I started hiding things. Notes I wrote, sketches of the park, tiny trinkets from friends. Anything that might give her reason to question me went into secret places. Under the loose floorboard, inside my old backpack, beneath my pillow. I lived in quiet rebellion. Inside, the house smelled like antiseptic and pine cleaner, like the hospital she could never seem to leave behind. Every creak in the floor, every shadow in the hallway seemed amplified. Mom installed security cameras in the kitchen and living room. "For your safety," she said, and I learned to move quietly, whisper quietly, breathe quietly, without meaning to. I became like her, cautious, hyper-aware. The outside world started to feel enormous and dangerous, while the inside became small and suffocating. School was the only place that felt halfway free. I'd watch kids laugh, run, ride bikes with the wind in their hair. I'd imagine what it felt like to be trusted. But I knew freedom came with consequences. I tested the boundaries anyway.
Small acts.
A wave across the street, a secret note tucked into my backpack, a letter to Emily, the girl down the block. When Mom found one of my letters, her face drained of color. Her hands trembled as she held the paper. "You can't do this, Max. You don't know what could happen. People are dangerous," she whispered, voice breaking. She took the letters, slammed the closet door, and that night a new camera appeared, this one mounted above my bed. From then on, I felt its blinking red light even when my eyes were closed. Sometimes I tried to argue. "Mom, I'm not a baby. I can take care of myself." Her eyes would go wide, wet with terror. "Do you want something bad to happen to you?" Every time she asked that, something inside me froze. I learned to nod, to agree, to stay quiet. Saying no wasn't defiance, it was betrayal. At night, I'd lie awake listening to her pacing the hall, the soft scrape of her slippers across the wood floor. Sometimes she whispered to herself words I couldn't make out. Other times she'd stop outside my door, breathing shallowly as if making sure I was still there. Thunderstorms were the worst. One spring night, lightning cracked outside and I reached for my sketch pad, a small, innocent comfort. She turned on me instantly, eyes wild and full of fear. "Do you want something to happen?" she hissed. My heart thudded. I nodded, mute, learning again that agreement was safety. It wasn't just the rules that trapped me. It was the invisible weight of her fear, how it filled the air, how it seeped into me. I loved my mom. God, I did. But I was beginning to hate the way her love felt like a prison. And yet I couldn't leave. Not yet. Not when the walls themselves seemed to bend around us. Protective, suffocating, alive. Whispering her lessons in every creak and echo. By the time I turned 11, my small rebellions grew more careful, more deliberate. I wrote letters I'd never send, drew maps of the park I wasn't allowed to visit, sketched the world as it might be, open, bright, untouched by my mother's shadow. But Mom always found a way in. One afternoon, she caught a note I'd written for Emily. Her face went bone white. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "Max, you can't do this. You can't." Then she tore the paper into confetti-sized pieces, her eyes glistening like I'd almost shattered something sacred. That was the day I learned survival didn't come from strength, it came from disappearing. I learned to move softly, to keep my voice low, to make myself smaller. At school, I smiled when people expected me to, laughed when I should, answered questions without revealing anything. Group projects made my stomach twist. I hated when kids leaned too close or touched my arm. I never told anyone my plans. I became precise, cautious, a version of myself that existed only in the spaces between words. Mom's protection seeped into every crack of my identity. Even when she let me outside, my joy was fractured. The swing set became a trap, the slide a warning. I could hear her stories looping in my head. Kids who vanished, dogs that mauled, strangers who waited. Adventure became a forbidden word, and yet something inside me still pushed back. I hid new letters in my closet. Took quick bike rides while Mom was distracted. Sometimes I'd peek over the fence to watch other kids play. Their laughter carried by the wind like a sound from another world. The taste of freedom was addictive, but every attempt came with the threat of discovery. Her voice would slice through the air like a blade. "Max, what are you doing?" Panic would flood me before I could even answer. My heartbeat would pound in my ears. Every escape, every stolen moment felt like walking a tightrope between hope and terror. It wasn't until middle school that someone finally noticed. My art teacher, Ms. Parker, started watching my drawings more closely. The ones filled with locked doors, barred windows, faceless people, empty streets. One afternoon, she crouched beside my desk and said softly, "These are powerful, Max. What are you trying to show?" Her voice was calm, safe. It was the first time in years I felt seen. I answered in fragments, half-truths, hesitant words about rules and fear and being watched. She listened. She didn't press, but she didn't look away either. Soon after, child services came. They spoke gently, like stepping through a minefield. For the first time, I saw my mother perform for strangers. Her smile too wide, her words sugar-sweet. "I'm just a careful parent," she told them. "The world isn't safe these days." But I knew what her eyes were saying underneath that smile. "You betrayed me." For weeks, I stayed with a foster family. Their house smelled like pancakes and laundry detergent. They gave me space. I rode my bike around the block without asking. I laughed out loud. I tasted birthday cake for the first time without guilt. It was dizzying, the absence of fear. That freedom, though, came with echoes. I flinched at sudden voices. I hesitated when someone reached for my shoulder. When people smiled, I wondered what they wanted. Mom's lessons were stitched deep inside me. The world is dangerous, trust no one, stay small. Even when the locks were gone, the fear stayed. By high school, I was quieter than most. By college, I was determined to understand it. I studied psychology, not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. I wanted to map the shape of fear, to name the thing that had built itself inside me. I learned about control, about trauma, about the fine line between protection and possession. And that's when it hit me. Mom had loved me, in her way. But her love had been poisoned by fear, transformed into something that trapped instead of nurtured. Her care became surveillance. Her affection became control. Years later, I still think about that house on Hawthorne Street. The smell of cleaner, the blinking red light of the camera above my bed, her voice trembling through the walls. I don't see it as home anymore. I see it as a place where love and fear were tangled so tightly that I forgot how to breathe. But I also see what came after. Growth, healing, slow, clumsy trust. I learned that freedom isn't loud or reckless, it's quiet at first. A fragile thing you hold close until it feels safe to let it bloom. Love that isolates, that controls, that smothers with warnings. It isn't love at all. It's ownership. Real care lets you step into the world even if you might fall. It gives you the courage to try again. I still move carefully. I still listen for footsteps in empty hallways. But I live now with friends, laughter, risk, and choice. The invisible chains she left behind still rattle sometimes, but they no longer hold me. When I think back on that summer of 2024, I still can't decide whether I found the house or if the house found me. The divorce papers were barely dry that April. My hand shook as I signed my name on the final page, the sound of the pen scratching like something closing forever. Owen and I packed what little we owned into the back of my dusty Subaru and drove through the fog-draped hills of Ashwood, Oregon, until we reached 89 Pineview Crescent. It looked like a postcard, an old Craftsman with white trim and a porch that wrapped around like an embrace. The realtor had left the lights on for us, warm and golden, catching the gleam of polished oak floors. I told myself this was it, a fresh start. a place where my son and I could finally breathe again. But underneath that hope was something darker. I was desperate to show Owen that I could give him a real home after his father's betrayal cracked our lives down the middle. "This house," I told him, standing in the empty living room, "is our fortress. Nothing bad can touch us here." That first night, I tucked him into his new room, the walls painted a soft blue, the air thick with that sterile scent of new beginnings. He wrinkled his nose. "It smells too clean," he whispered. I laughed it off, brushing his hair back. "That's just the varnish, sweetheart." But the word stuck in me like a splinter. In those first weeks, I threw myself into perfection. Curtains hung at symmetrical angles. Photos lined up like soldiers on the wall. I scrubbed the cabinets until my reflection blinked back from the wood. Control became my armor. If everything stayed just right, maybe nothing else would fall apart. Owen was quieter. He spent hours drawing, his pencil whispering over the paper while his eyes flicked to the corners of rooms as if expecting something to move. At first, I ignored the small things. The coffee mug left out, though I knew I'd put it away. The bathroom door that drifted open after I'd shut it tight. Houses settle, I told myself. They creak, they breathe. But at night, when the air thickened and the floorboards sighed, I could have sworn I heard faint whispers rising from the attic. I told Owen never to go up there. "It's dusty. Dangerous," I said. He just nodded. But his gaze kept wandering to the narrow pull-down ladder in the hallway ceiling. Forbidding something, I realized too late, is the same as planting curiosity like a seed. It was a rainy Thursday when I caught him in the backyard, hunched near the tree line, talking softly to himself. His sketch pad balanced on his knees. "Owen?" I called. He startled, snapping the book shut. "Who were you talking to?" I asked. "No one," he said too quickly. His face was pale, lips tight. That night, after he'd gone to bed, I found his sketchbook left open on the coffee table. Page after page of dark, spindly figures stared back. Tall shapes crouching in corners, their limbs stretched too long, their heads bent like they were listening. My stomach tightened. When I asked him about them the next morning, he muttered without looking up. "They wait in the attic." The certainty in his voice chilled me. I told myself it was just imagination, divorce stress, a child's way of making sense of loss. Still, I started checking the locks 3 times before bed, walking the house with a flashlight like a sentry. Each time I passed beneath the attic hatch, something heavy pressed against my chest. Then one evening, I found the front door unlocked. Panic surged through me. "Owen?" I shouted, running from room to room. No answer. The silence felt alive. Then I saw it, a faint glow spilling from the attic. My hands shook as I climbed the ladder. He was sitting there, cross-legged on the dusty board, surrounded by his toys, papers torn, eyes wide and glassy. "Owen," I whispered, kneeling beside him. "What are you doing up here?" "They won't let me sleep," he said softly, pointing toward the far corner. The shadows there seemed thicker, pulsing almost like something breathing just out of sight. For a split second, I thought I saw movement, tall shapes shifting, folding into the dark. My breath hitched. Then it was gone. "Come on," I said, forcing calm.
"Let's go downstairs." I lifted him, clutching him so tightly he squirmed.
"It's okay," I whispered, though even as I said it, I knew it wasn't. After that night, the house changed. Doors slammed, though no wind blew. Books fell. Frames cracked. I'd wake to footsteps above us, measured and slow, crossing the upstairs hall. Owen hardly slept. His drawings grew frantic, crowded scenes of the house surrounded by shadowy figures pressing in from every side. And every night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I felt it too. That quiet, watching wait, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something neither of us could name. At school, the teachers started calling more often. They said Owen seemed distracted, that he stared out the window instead of answering questions. I told them it was the divorce, that he just needed time to adjust. But deep down, I wasn't sure. There was something hollow behind his eyes lately, something that didn't feel like grief. One night, I decided to stay in his room. I wanted proof that everything was fine, that all the strange feelings were just stress and exhaustion. Around midnight, Owen stirred in his sleep. Then suddenly his eyes opened, sharp and alert, as if he'd been listening all along. "Do you hear them?" he whispered. The words made my stomach tighten. I listened. For a moment, there was only rain against the window, a slow, steady rhythm, then something else, A faint murmur. Not quite voices, not quite wind. Words I couldn't understand threaded through the sound of the rain. My skin prickled. I grabbed the flashlight and climbed the attic ladder, each creak of wood echoing in my chest. The beam sliced through darkness, catching on dust motes and broken boards. Nothing moved, but it felt like someone had just stepped out of sight. Like something had been there and slipped away the moment I looked. When I turned back, Owen was gone. I tore through the house, shouting his name until my throat burned raw. I checked the closets, the bathroom, the yard, even the street. Nothing. The house was too still, too silent. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst. When I called the police, my voice shook so badly the dispatcher had to ask me to slow down. They searched the house, the woods, the whole neighborhood. No sign of forced entry, no footprints in the mud, no trace of a boy who had ever been there. They left me with nothing but questions and that look, the kind that says they think the problem isn't outside the house but inside me. Days blurred into weeks. I stopped showing up for work, missed deadlines, let calls go unanswered. Friends came once or twice, but the way they looked at me, at the dark circles under my eyes, the shaking hands, told me they wouldn't come again. The house wouldn't let me rest. Every night I heard footsteps in the hallway. Light, quick ones. Owen's. I'd rush to his room, throw open the door, whispering, "Please, please be there." But the bed was always empty. Sometimes I heard him calling from above. "Mom!" Just that soft pleading. I'd scramble up the ladder, heart racing, only to find the same dusty boards, the same corner that seemed to pulse with shadows that bent and breathed. A neighbor mentioned him once, casually over the fence. "Saw a boy in the woods last night," he said, sipping his coffee. "Looked like your son." The world tilted. I couldn't remember the night Owen disappeared. Had I really been there with him? Had the attic light been on? Or had I dreamed it? My memories felt like water slipping through my hands, warm, real, and gone the moment I tried to hold them. In the mirror, I hardly recognized myself. My eyes looked wild, my hair tangled, my skin pale and tight around my bones. Sometimes I wondered if Owen had ever existed at all. Maybe I had built him out of loneliness and fear. Maybe my mind, already cracked from betrayal and sleepless nights, had conjured a child just so I wouldn't be alone. But then I'd open his sketchbook, pages full of those tall, spindly figures crouched in corners, and I'd know he was real. Once. By autumn, the house had devoured me whole. Every creak was a footstep, every whisper a name. I stopped leaving entirely. Bills piled at the door. Work emails went unanswered. I drifted through the rooms, whispering for Owen, waiting for a reply that never came. Sometimes I heard him laugh, light and distant, echoing down the hall. Once I thought I saw him standing at the end of it just for a second, his face pale in the half-light before the dark folded over him again. I went to the attic one last time. Sat there for hours, dust clinging to my clothes, the air heavy as sleep. "Give him back," I whispered. "Take me instead." My voice cracked. I would have given anything for a sound, a sign, something. But only the house answered, groaning softly, wood shifting, the wind brushing through the eaves like a sigh. Now, months later, I don't know where the truth ends. Maybe Owen was taken. Maybe he ran. Maybe he never existed outside the walls of my unraveling mind. But the attic still waits. It always waits. Some nights, when the wind moves through the trees, I swear I hear a boy's laughter drift from the woods. I press my hand to the glass, heart aching with a mix of hope and dread. Maybe he's out there. Maybe he's gone. Maybe I've been chasing echoes all along. But the house, our perfect shining fortress, has teeth. It keeps what it claims, and I think it still holds us both. Because sometimes the most dangerous hauntings don't come from the shadows around us, but from the ones we carry inside. Fear, guilt, the illusion of control. They whisper until love turns to obsession, and memory rots into madness, and in the quiet that follows. I used to think my family was perfect. That's the cruel trick of childhood, how the walls you grow up inside feel like a fortress even when they're quietly collapsing. I remember our house in Aberdeen under winter skies. Tall gray stone walls slick with rain, windows glowing gold against the cold. To everyone else, we were respectable. A lawyer father, a mother who baked bread that made the whole street smell like heaven, and a daughter who smiled politely every Sunday at church. People envied us. They didn't know. My father, Robert Morton, was a drinker, not the friendly kind who sang pub songs, but the kind who turned liquor into fuel for fury. I learned early to recognize the rhythm of his footsteps, that dangerous quiet before he exploded. Sometimes he threw things, sometimes his hand found my arm or cheek. The bruises were never obvious. He was careful like that. My mother, Margaret, never stopped him. She prayed instead, whispering scripture like it could hold back his fists. The night he was arrested, I was 17. He'd attacked another man at the pub, swinging wild until the police pulled him off. I remember watching them drag him away, sirens flashing across our walls, thinking, maybe this was freedom. He was gone, locked up. Just Mom and me now. I wanted to breathe again, to believe we could start over. And for a while I did. She seemed strong at first. Eliza, she told me, we'll be all right. God doesn't break families unless he plans to rebuild them stronger. Her chin lifted, voice steady. She took over the bills, smiled for the neighbors, walked into church beside me like a survivor. But the cracks showed fast. She stopped sleeping. I'd wake to find her scrubbing the floor at 2 a.m, humming hymns through clenched teeth. She locked the front door with 3 deadbolts, muttering about keeping demons out. I told myself it was stress, but something in her eyes had changed. Mom, I whispered one night when I found her polishing silverware, her hands red and raw. You don't have to do this. She didn't look up. If I don't, who will? You think anyone cares about us, Eliza? You think God will do it all for us? Her words chilled me. That wasn't the woman who used to braid my hair before school. I didn't understand then how love could sour into something else, how grief could ferment into madness. By the winter of 1998, I was losing her. By spring, the house felt like a cage. I buried myself in schoolwork, sketching buildings, dreaming of designing houses one day, places that kept people safe instead of trapping them. But every time I spread my notebooks across the kitchen table, Mom's eyes lingered too long. One evening, she stared at a sketch of a glass tower. False kingdoms, she muttered. What? I asked. God doesn't want us building towers to the sky. That's pride, Eliza, that's sin. I laughed nervously. It's just homework, Mom, not the Tower of Babel. Her hand slammed the table. My pencils jumped. Don't mock me. Don't you dare mock the word of God. I froze. She'd never yelled at me before. That night I found my sketchbook burning in the fireplace, pages curling into black ash. A few days later, Hannah, my best friend since primary school, came over wearing a red scarf her grandmother had knitted. Mom's smile vanished the instant she saw it. Take that off, she snapped. Hannah blinked. Excuse me? Red is the devil's color. You won't bring curses into this house. Mom, I hissed, it's just a scarf. Her eyes glittered. She won't step foot here again. She's plotting against us. Hannah left in tears. I stood trembling, humiliation burning through me. You're losing it, I whispered. Her hand flew before I could flinch. The slap cracked across my cheek, sharp personal final. I'd felt my father's blows before, but this one broke something deeper. Later that night, she knelt by her bed, rocking and praying, while I touched the sting on my face and realized my mother was slipping somewhere I couldn't reach. The neighbors began to whisper. Small things at first. Mom shouting at Mrs. Callahan about the gas bill, slapping another neighbor who offered help. Then came the boiling water. 2 officers at the door. Calm voices, gentle words. Mom threw scalding water toward them, screaming, You're Satan's soldiers. I'll never forget the way the officers looked at me afterward, pity flickering behind their eyes, tangled with unease. One of them said softly, She needs help, miss. But you can't force her unless she's a danger to herself or others. She is a danger, I cried. Can't you see that? But paperwork, procedure, bureaucracy, everything moved slower than her madness. At night she wandered the hall whispering prayers, fingers grazing the locks on my door. I'd lie there with my heart pounding, waiting for the moment the whispering would stop. Because silence meant something worse was coming. One morning I tried reason. Mom, please. People are worried. I'm worried. You need rest. Maybe talk to a doctor. Her eyes flared. You think I'm crazy? You think I don't see what they're doing? They want to tear us apart. They want to steal my angel. I'm not your angel, I whispered. I'm your daughter, and I'm scared." For a heartbeat, her face softened, fragile, human again. Then she turned away, locking herself in the bathroom for hours, chanting until her voice went hoarse. The house stopped smelling like bread. It smelled of bleach and burnt paper. It sounded like locks snapping shut. It felt like love buried alive under fear. When the social workers came, I thought salvation had arrived. They sat across from me at the kitchen table, pens scratching, voices gentle. One woman said, "Eliza, if your mother doesn't accept treatment, we may have to consider foster care just until she gets better." Foster care? The words lodged in my throat. I was almost grown, but leaving my room, my sketches, even those haunted walls, felt like losing the last scrap of home. "Can't you just help her?" I begged. They tried, but Mom refused. She screamed scripture at them, called them agents of the devil. I watched her toss their pamphlets into the fire, her face glowing with feverish triumph. That night, I heard her pacing outside my door again. I pressed my back to the wood, clutching the kitchen knife I'd hidden under my pillow. Her shadow swayed beneath the crack of light. She muttered prayers about purity, obedience, sacrifice. I bit down on my tongue to keep from making a sound. The next morning, she cornered me in the kitchen. "If you ever betray me to them, Eliza, if you ever let them take me away, God will punish you. Do you hear me?" Her voice was sharp, but her hands trembled. For the first time, I saw fear in her, not of me, but of losing control, of herself. "Mom," I whispered, tears stinging. "I just want you back." She turned her face away. "Back is gone," she murmured. "Only forward. Only God." The end came sudden, violent, inevitable. One night her screams jolted the neighbors awake. They called the police. By the time the officers broke down the door, she was hurling dishes at shadows only she could see. Her voice was raw from shouting about demons crawling through the walls. I stood frozen in the corner as they restrained her. She clawed at them, snarling prayers. Her face twisted into something I barely recognized. For a moment, our eyes met. There was no hate, no recognition, just a vast, hollow emptiness that shattered me more than any slap ever had. They took her to a psychiatric facility under an emergency order. The medication quieted her storms, softened her edges. The doctors said she might recover in time. But I knew there was no going back. I visited sometimes. She'd smile, calm, polite, almost normal. But every time I saw it, I waited for that smile to crack, for the madness to peek through again. I left Aberdeen for university with scars no one could see. On the outside, I seemed fine. But at night, I still heard footsteps in empty halls, locks clicking, prayers whispered through the dark. I remembered the woman who baked bread, the woman with wild eyes. And I understood. Love can twist, safety can rot, and family can betray. Madness doesn't always come from the dark outside. Sometimes it grows quietly inside the people we trust most. Appearances deceive. Silence can destroy, and survival sometimes means letting go of the ones you ache to save. Trust is sacred, but it should never blind you to danger, even when it wears the face of home. I used to believe my mother was the strongest woman in the world. Caroline Turner wasn't like the other moms in Portland, Maine. She didn't pack tidy lunches with handwritten notes or spend Saturday mornings at bake sales. She wasn't steady like that. She was more like the ocean that crashed against the rocky shore near our house, beautiful, wild, and unpredictable. Before I was born, she'd been a singer at a smoky bar downtown. Her voice husky, her dresses tight, her lipstick always a little too red. She told me she gave it all up when my father left, said raising me was her greatest performance. "It's just you and me, Soph," she'd whisper, pulling me close, her perfume sharp and sweet. "No one else matters." I didn't understand then that sometimes she meant it as love, and sometimes as a warning. By the time I was 11, I had learned to watch her moods like weather patterns. If her smile was too wide, if her eyes darted too quickly, if she started humming those old songs under her breath, I knew a storm was coming. One wrong word and she'd snap. Not always with her hands. Sometimes her voice was enough. "Ungrateful," she'd hiss. "Don't make me regret giving up everything for you." That rainy October night in 2005, I sat in the back seat of her Buick, tapping my sneakers against the floorboard. The car smelled faintly of cigarettes, though she always swore she'd quit. The wipers screeched across the glass, fighting the downpour. We'd pulled into a dying strip mall, half the stores boarded up, a single streetlight buzzing above the ATM. Mom grabbed her purse and stepped out into the rain. I watched her, half afraid she'd just disappear into it. That's when I saw him. A man standing near the alley, hood pulled low, shoulders hunched. He wasn't loitering. He was watching. "Mom," I whispered, leaning forward, tugging her sleeve before she opened the door. "He's staring at you." She laughed softly, the way she did when she wanted to erase my fear. "Don't be silly, Sophie. People look. That's what they do." But my stomach nodded. His eyes were sharp, darting. The air felt heavier. She strode toward the ATM unbothered while I pressed my face to the window, heart pounding. Then it happened, so fast it felt like a dream I'd already had. The man lunged, slamming her against the concrete, yanking her purse. Her scream was swallowed by the storm. I stumbled out of the car, yelling, "Leave her alone!" He turned on me, his rough hands gripping my shoulders. "Shut up or she dies," he growled. I froze. My body trembled, tears blurring my vision. Before he could drag me farther, my mother erupted. Not with fear, but something feral. She clawed at his arm, shrieking, "Don't touch what's mine!" He flinched, startled by her fury, and bolted into the rain, vanishing down the alley. Mom collapsed onto the wet pavement, breathing hard, her eyes burning with something that scared me even more than the man had. People ran over. Someone wrapped a blanket around me. Someone called 911. But when the police arrived, Mom's words tumbled out in frantic bursts, accusing them of being in on it, accusing me of unlocking the door. Her voice shook, her thoughts tangled. She looked at me like I was part of the threat. That night, I stopped believing my mother was the strongest woman in the world. That night, I started wondering if she was the most dangerous. The days after blurred together. Everyone at school asked what happened. I gave them the short version. Some guy tried to rob us, but we're fine now. The truth was too heavy. Mom wasn't fine. She stopped sleeping, pacing the house all night, peeking through the blinds every few minutes. Then came the locks, padlocks on every door. One for the basement, one on my bedroom door. "Just in case," she said with a thin smile. Next came the mirrors. She covered them with sheets, muttering about eyes watching from the glass. Once I tried to uncover the bathroom mirror to brush my hair. She caught me. Her fingers clamped my wrists so hard her nails left crescents in my skin. "Do you want them to see us?" she hissed. I didn't ask who they were. I knew better. Then came the drills. Safety drills, she called them, pretending it was a game. She'd shove me into the closet, padlock it, and tell me to stay silent until she opened it again. Sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes 2 hours. I'd sit in the dark, knees pulled to my chest, biting my sleeve to muffle my sobs. "Better you hate me now than get taken later," she'd say when she finally let me out. At school, I jumped at footsteps in the hall, flinched at raised voices. Friends stopped calling. One afternoon, my teacher noticed the bruises on my wrist. I mumbled something about tripping, but she didn't buy it. The next week, social services came. I remember the day they took me like it was yesterday. A woman with kind eyes and a clipboard came into the classroom. She knelt beside my desk and whispered, "Sophie, we're going to take a little trip." My stomach dropped. I wanted to scream, to cling to the desk to make her leave me there. But something inside me also exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for years. They brought me to a foster family, the Millers. Their house smelled like cinnamon and laundry detergent. They gave me a soft bed, tucked me in with a quilt, and asked what my favorite breakfast was. For the first time in so long, warmth didn't come with strings attached. But peace never lasted where my mom was concerned. She fought in court, sobbing on the witness stand, telling the judge how much she loved me. She painted herself as a victim of trauma, a mother who'd only tried to protect her daughter from a cruel world. After therapy and medication, they granted her supervised visits. We sat across from each other in sterile rooms that smelled of disinfectant. Her smile stretched too wide. "You know they can't keep us apart forever," she whispered once, eyes gleaming. "It's you and me, Soph, always." I nodded because that's what she needed. But inside I was beginning to understand. Sometimes the person you're supposed to run to is the one you need to escape from. The visits started once a week. Mom would show up with cookies she swore she'd baked. Though they were clearly store-bought, she'd hug me too tightly, her perfume clinging to my clothes. "Don't listen to them," she'd whisper. They just want to keep us apart." The supervisor smiled politely, never noticing the sharpness in her words, the way her hands trembled. To them, she was just a heartbroken mother. To me, she was a storm waiting to break. One afternoon during a visit, she leaned close and murmured, "You think they'll protect you? They can't, no one can. It's only me." I stared at the table, tracing the scratches in the wood, pretending not to hear. Her hand slammed down, the sound cracking through the room. The supervisor jumped. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," she snapped, then forced a smile. "Sorry, I miss her so much." I knew the act by heart. At the Millers, I tried to fit into normal life. Mrs. Miller taught me how to bake banana bread, laughing when I spilled flour. Mr. Miller held the back of my bike seat until I stopped wobbling. Their daughter Claire invited me to sleepovers, painted my nails, braided my hair. For a while I let myself believe I belonged there, but my mom's shadow always followed. One night the phone rang. Mrs. Miller answered, her brow furrowed. She handed it to me gently. "It's your mom." My hand shook as I pressed the receiver to my ear. "Hi," I whispered. "They can't keep you forever," she said, voice low and urgent. "Pack a bag." "I'll come get you." "I can't," I whispered. Her breath hitched, then turned sharp. "Ungrateful. After everything I've done for you, you'd rather live with strangers than your own mother?" I hung up. Tears burned my eyes. Mrs. Miller wrapped her arms around me, but guilt pressed down like a weight. I loved my mother. I was terrified of her. At school, I started therapy. The counselor asked me to draw how I felt. I drew a house with padlocks on every door. "Who's inside?" she asked softly. "Me," I whispered. Her eyes softened. "Do you want to get out?" I didn't answer. I didn't know if I could. The older I got, the sharper the memories became. That night at the ATM played over and over, not the man, but my mother's face. The wildness in her eyes, the way she screamed, not in fear, but fury. I realized the real terror hadn't come from outside. It had always lived inside her. Even as a teenager, she haunted me. She sent letters from therapy, each one swinging between love and accusation. "I'm proud of you, Soph," one would say, followed by, "Don't let them poison you against me." I'd tear them up, but her words stayed like splinters under my skin. When I turned 16, the court gave me a choice: stay with the Millers permanently or try reunification with my mom. I didn't hesitate. I chose the Millers. Mom screamed in the courtroom, her voice echoing. "She's mine! You can't steal her!" The gavel struck, but her words stayed in my head for years. I graduated, went to college out of state, tried to build a normal life. But fear lingered. I flinched in parking lots, double-checked my locks, avoided mirrors at night. When friends asked, "Why are you so jumpy?" I just shrugged. How could I tell them that my mother's love felt like a cage? Now as an adult, I see it clearly. My mother wasn't a monster, not always. She tucked me in at night, sang lullabies, brushed my hair when I was sick. But love twisted by paranoia and control becomes something else. Sometimes I visit Portland, though I don't see her. She's older now, quieter, the fire dimmed by years of medication. I hear she lives in a group home, still muttering about conspiracies. Sometimes I wonder if she thinks of me, if she regrets the storm she brought into my childhood. I'll never know. But I do know this. The night of the mugging, when she screamed like an animal and saved me, was also the night she showed me the truth. The danger wasn't strangers in alleys. It was trusting someone who couldn't tell where love ended and control began. Fear doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes it lives in the people we love most. Trust has to be earned, not demanded. And no matter how deep the bond of blood runs, it's never wrong to walk away when love becomes a prison. I remember the first time I realized my life wasn't normal, though back then I thought it was. I was 8 years old, standing on a narrow stage somewhere in Los Angeles. The spotlights were so bright they made the sweat on my forehead shimmer like tiny diamonds. My chest rose and fell too fast. The crowd wasn't cheering for me, they were cheering for her dream. Veronica Weiss, my mother, had once been an actress, a Hollywood hopeful with 2 high heels and 2 enormous ambitions, but the industry had spat her out, leaving her with little more than bitterness and a burning promise. If she couldn't shine, then I would. "Lift your chin, Clara," she hissed from the front row, her voice slicing through the music like a blade. Do you want to look like a rag doll again? My smile tightened. I tried. I forced my lips into a grin that felt more like a scream. My body trembled from exhaustion, my sequined dress pinching at places I didn't even know could hurt. To the audience, I looked like a confident little girl twirling under the lights. But inside, I felt like a marionette, pulled by invisible strings dancing inside a cage I didn't understand. My father had left years before. Mom said he was weak.
He didn't believe in your talent, she told me with a mixture of disgust and pity.
When I was 6, I thought he was a coward. By 8, I realized he'd just escaped first. Home wasn't really home. It was a fortress built from her rules and my fear. Mirrors covered every wall so I could see my progress. Shoes had to be worn even when my feet throbbed. Meals were weighed to the calorie. I wasn't allowed to slouch, frown, or even breathe wrong. Pain makes you perfect, she'd snap if I winced. Stars don't get messy, Clara. They shine. She paced behind me during practice, correcting every motion, posture, smile, even the rhythm of my breathing. At night, she'd stand behind me as I brushed my hair, her reflection towering over mine in the mirror. Remember, they're always watching, she'd whisper. I learned quickly that dreams were dangerous. When she found the notebook I kept hidden under my bed, filled with sketches of buildings, bridges, and quiet places where no one clapped, she tore it apart. "Stop wasting time with childish fantasies," she said, her voice trembling with fury. "You were born to be seen, not to build." I told myself someday she'd see me for who I was, not what she wanted me to be. But hope was just another performance. By the time I turned 12, my childhood had been carved away, piece by piece. Birthdays were replaced with rehearsals. Sleepovers were distractions. Cake was poison. Every night, I'd lie in bed listening to the sound of her typing, fast, frantic on her laptop, or muttering to herself in the kitchen. I never moved. I never coughed. Even the floorboards learned to hold their breath. One afternoon at school, a classmate named Lila asked, "Hey, Clara, you want to come to the movies this weekend?" Her voice was casual, kind. I froze, my throat tightened. I didn't know how to say yes without inviting hell. I have homework," I stammered, eyes dropping to the floor. "Oh," she said, frowning. "Maybe next time?" I nodded, but there was never a next time. That night, Mom stared at me across the dinner table, eyes narrow, smile fixed. "You smiled too long at the wrong person today," she said softly, brushing her fingers along my cheek like a surgeon examining a wound. "Remember, every gesture counts. Every flaw is a disaster waiting to happen." I hated her for it sometimes. Other times I hated myself for being too weak to stop her. She had built her life around my performance and mine around her approval. I didn't want to be a model. I wanted to be an architect, to design something that stood still and silent, not something that had to sparkle on command. But in our world, silence was failure and applause was oxygen. The competitions began to feel like battlefields. Every time I stepped onto a stage, I could hear her voice whispering inside my head. "Sharp and relentless, smile wider. Clara, don't disappoint me." The applause always came, but it never felt like victory. Each round of cheers sounded like nails against a coffin lid. Every trophy she placed on the shelf felt heavier than the last, and every smile I gave the world felt like another piece of me being buried alive. At 14, everything got worse. The regional competitions were brutal. Long rehearsals, endless posing, forced smiles until my cheeks ached. My days were a blur of calorie counts, mirror drills, and Mom's voice drilling into my skull like a metronome. Again, shoulders back. Smile softer. No, not like that. She was everywhere, counting every step, every breath, every word that came out of my mouth. Then came Malene. She was everything Mom wanted me to be. Graceful, confident, dazzling under the lights. She didn't flinch when the judges stared. She didn't tremble. She sparkled. I lost to her that day. Backstage, mascara burning my eyes, I whispered, "Maybe I'm just not good enough." Mom knelt beside me, wrapping her arms around my trembling shoulders. "You are good enough," she murmured into my hair. "Don't forget that, Clara, we're unstoppable." Her voice was soft, almost tender, but something in her tone felt like a warning. The next morning, everything changed. Malene collapsed in her hotel room. Dead. Rumors spread fast, whispers of poison, jealousy, sabotage. I remember sitting on the hotel bed, my stomach hollow, while sunlight spilled through the curtains, slicing the room in gold and shadow. That's when I saw it, the small vial in Mom's open purse. Crushed white pills glittered faintly under the light. "Mom," I said, my voice breaking, "what did you do?" She didn't even blink. She just smiled, calm and terrifyingly certain. "I removed the obstacle. One day you'll thank me." My throat closed. I wanted to scream, to run, to tell someone, but all I could do was stare. Every trophy, every smile, every ounce of applause suddenly felt soaked in blood. After that, I tried to tell people. A teacher, a social worker, even a judge once during a custody check. But Mom was brilliant. She could cry on cue, twist words into ribbons of pity. "She's just under pressure," she'd say, brushing my hair like I was a porcelain doll. "I'm doing everything I can for her. You know how competitive the industry is." They always believed her. Everyone did. Behind closed doors, I grew smaller. She never hit me. She didn't have to. Her voice did the damage, sharp, cold, relentless. I stopped eating. I stopped looking at myself. At night, she'd sit at the foot of my bed, stroking my ankle with her long, cold fingers. "We're unstoppable," she'd whisper. "You and I, don't betray me." I would nod, eyes wide open, too terrified to move. I learned early that survival meant silence. Even school felt like another stage. Teachers commented on my discipline, my dedication. They didn't see the tremor in my hands or the way my smile cracked under fluorescent lights. My classmates invited me out, ice cream, birthdays, study groups, but I always said no. "I have practice. My mom's waiting. Maybe next time." There was never a next time. The cage wasn't made of bars. It was made of expectations. Invisible but unbreakable. Years passed before I finally found a way out. At 18, I got a scholarship for architecture. A miracle, really, and used it like a lifeline. I packed a single suitcase and left before dawn. Mom's calls came daily at first. "Don't forget who made you," she'd sneer when I didn't answer right away. "You're nothing without me." I blocked her number, deleted her messages. I left the mirror-lined apartment behind and never looked back. College was the first place that felt real. I could breathe there. I could draw again. I'd sit by the studio window sketching buildings with open spaces and sunlight streaming through wide, clean glass. No reflections, no watchers. Just air and light. Still, the ghosts lingered. Loud applause makes me flinch. A voice behind me, especially a woman's, can make my chest tighten. When someone says perfect, my pulse stutters. But I've learned. I've healed mostly. I built a life that belongs to me. I found therapy, real friends, a sense of safety I never knew existed. I learned that ambition without love is just cruelty dressed in glitter. My mother's obsession nearly destroyed me, but it also taught me something precious. How to build, not perform. How to stand in light without being consumed by it. Ambition should never demand your soul. Love should never feel like a leash. And no amount of applause, no trophy, no title in the world is worth the quiet death of a child's spirit. My name is Samantha Dio, and I grew up in a weathered colonial house at 12 Bramblewood Lane in Ashford, Maine, where the scent of polished mahogany always tangled with the sharp breath of sea salt from the bay. The floors creaked like old bones, and the windows whistled when the wind turned from the shore. My mother, Evelyn, was the kind of woman people admired without ever really knowing. She ran an antique shop downtown, Evelyn's Finds, and everyone in town praised her taste, her grace, her impossible ability to turn decay into beauty. But what they didn't see was the precision behind her charm. She lived by rules, by labels, by control. Every inch of our house was her reflection, tidy, deliberate, staged. And over time, I realized so was I. When I was 12, I started noticing the pattern. She labeled everything, everything. Drawers, pantry shelves, even the sugar jar. My notebooks had colored tabs she'd made herself. Math, science, chores, behavior. She said it helped keep the chaos out. At first, I thought it was harmless. I'd laugh when she caught me rolling my eyes. "Someday you'll thank me, Sam," she'd say with that practiced smile. Order keeps us safe. But at night, the house didn't feel safe. I'd lie awake listening to faint movements, floorboards groaning under invisible weight, something dragging, a whisper that slid through the walls like a sigh. It always came from the locked room on the second floor. the one I wasn't allowed to enter. Whenever I asked about it, Mom would barely look up from her tea. "The wind, Samantha," she'd say lightly. "Old houses settle, that's all." I wanted to believe her. God, I really did. But that door, it felt alive, like it was listening. So I started paying closer attention. A vase would move slightly to the left. My school notes, gone from my desk one day, returned the next with a faint coffee stain, photos on the hallway wall that seemed to shift angles overnight, as though someone had been staring too long and forgot where they'd been placed. It was subtle at first, but I began to feel something off, like my life was being curated. During the day, I played my part. I joked with friends, smiled in class, nodded when teachers praised my handwriting. But coming home felt like stepping into a stage set built for someone else's performance. Mom always knew where I'd been, what I'd said, even things I hadn't told her. Her voice would float through the house, calm and melodic. "You shouldn't keep secrets from me, sweetheart. Secrets cause clutter. Clutter. That was her word for everything she couldn't control. By the time I turned 14, the air between us was suffocating. I hid my diary in the lining of my backpack. I whispered to myself only in the shower, where the sound of running water might drown me out. I stopped locking the bathroom door because she'd just find a reason to remove it. Every small act of rebellion, writing a private thought, leaving a cup in the sink, became a quiet war. And she always won. Until one rainy Thursday. The house was still, the sky a bruise-colored haze pressing against the windows. Mom had gone to the antique fair in Portland. I stood in the hallway staring at the locked room's door, its brass handle catching a dull glint of light. The air felt colder there, like the walls exhaled. My heart hammered as I reached into the drawer by the stairs, where Mom kept the keys in a neat labeled tray. Attic, basement, office, second room. The brass key was heavier than I expected. My fingers trembled as I fitted into the lock. Click. The sound echoed through the hallway like a verdict. When I pushed the door open, the smell hit me first, dust, paper, a faint sweetness like decayed flowers. The curtains were drawn, letting in only a thin gray light. Inside, everything was terrifyingly tidy. Shelves lined the walls, filled with journals, hundreds of them, stacked and labeled in my mother's delicate script. Samantha, age 5. Samantha, school year. 7. Samantha, social behavior. Summer. My stomach turned. I picked one up, the leather cover soft from use. When I opened it, my name stared back at me in her handwriting. Every page was filled with entries. Conversations, incidents, dates, every moment of my life documented in obsessive, minute detail. Samantha lied about finishing homework. Confronted her gently. Tears followed. Samantha looked distracted today, possible defiance. Samantha spoke with Mrs. Klein after class. Investigate why. Some pages described things that never happened. Memories she'd rewritten. Events twisted until they felt like something out of her imagination. She'd even recorded moments I didn't remember living. I snapped the journal shut, hands shaking, but curiosity isn't something you can bury once it's awake. From that day, I started watching her instead. How she'd move through the house, rearranging objects by millimeters. How she'd glance at my phone, then later act as if she already knew what I'd texted. How emails disappeared. She wasn't just controlling the house, she was controlling the narrative. And somewhere deep down, I began to understand. My mother wasn't preserving order. She was rewriting reality. One labeled drawer. One altered memory, one falsified journal at a time. I felt like I was living inside a maze made of mirrors. Every reflection slightly off. Every memory warped just enough to make me question myself. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. I'd walk through the halls of that house and feel as though even the air had been edited. My own life no longer belonged to me. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. It was a late winter night. The wind outside was rattling the windows and the old pipes hissed like the house was whispering secrets. Mom sat at the kitchen table, tea steaming beside her. Her hands folded neatly, nails painted the color of bone. I stood across from her, my heart pounding so hard it made my vision shake. "Mom," I said, my voice breaking despite the effort to steady it. "Why are you rewriting everything? Why do you do this?" She looked up at me slowly, like she'd been expecting the question for years. Her eyes softened. "To protect you, darling," she said gently. "To keep our world safe." I swallowed hard. Safe from what? From chaos. From pain. Her tone was serene, her smile faint. "Some people can't handle the truth, Samantha. The truth is cruel. I just make it kinder." Her words were supposed to sound like love, but they landed like ice. I stood there watching her sip her tea, steady and graceful as if she hadn't just confessed to rewriting my entire life. That night, something inside me cracked. The person I had trusted most, the one who'd taught me how to tie my shoes, how to smile for the camera, how to keep order, had also been the architect of my confusion. From then on, I started documenting everything. I kept a small notebook hidden beneath a loose floorboard in my room. Every night I'd write down every detail of the day, the exact words spoken, the expressions on faces, even the weather. I recorded voice memos on my phone labeled with dates and times. I became my own archivist, desperate to preserve something untouched by her hands. Every interaction became a test. When she'd say, "You didn't tell me about that test," I'd flip through my notes later to prove that I had. When she'd insist, "You were angry with me yesterday," I'd listen back to the recording and hear only calm. But even with evidence, doubt crept in. What if I was the one remembering wrong? What if I was the one twisting things? That's how it worked. Her control didn't need chains. It used uncertainty. Sleep became rare. Every creak of the floorboards felt like her footsteps. Every whisper of wind outside the window felt like her voice. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was standing just outside my door, rewriting my night in her mind. High school became my only escape, a strange blend of freedom and paranoia. Between classes and after-school clubs, I felt almost normal. I worked part-time at a bookstore, stacking shelves just to feel like I had some say over what stayed where. But even then, I'd catch myself checking. Had anyone moved my things? Had anyone rewritten my day? I became hyper-aware, trained to observe every flicker of change. My survival depended on it. Eventually, I realized there was only one way out: leaving. When I got accepted to a college 2 states away, I told her with a trembling smile. She nodded, lips pressed tight as though she already knew. "It's good to see you taking initiative," she said softly. "You'll need that skill when you're on your own." The first night in my dorm, I sat on the bare mattress surrounded by unpacked boxes, the fluorescent light humming faintly. For the first time, I could breathe without feeling observed. I unpacked books, arranged them how I wanted, and left a cup on the desk overnight just to see it still there in the morning. It was freedom. And it was terrifying. The silence felt wrong at first, like something was missing. But slowly I began to realize what that something was. Her control. The air felt different without it, heavier but more honest. I could walk out without explaining myself, laugh without documenting the moment, exist without an audience. Still, the ghosts of Bramblewood Lane followed me. The locked room, the scent of polished wood and paper, the rows of journals, each one a distorted reflection of me. Sometimes, even now, years later, I'll hear a floorboard creak in my apartment and my stomach will tighten before I remind myself I'm alone. Certain sounds, rustling paper, the soft click of a lock send a jolt through me. But I've learned to live with that. It's part of the residue, the scar tissue left behind by her obsession. I've learned to rebuild trust, though carefully. I listen more than I speak. I watch people's eyes, their tone, the rhythm of their words. I let trust earn its place, not assume it. The world beyond that house is vast and messy and unpredictable, but it's real. And I've learned that reality, even when it hurts, is better than a beautiful lie. Leaving wasn't just about moving away. It was about reclaiming my own mind, the right to remember, to believe, to be wrong, to be real. Now when I look back, I understand the difference between protection and control, between care and possession. What she called love was really fear. Fear of losing grip, fear of chaos, fear of truth. Freedom, I've realized, isn't the absence of walls. It's the ability to trust the world without someone else scripting it for you. And the most haunting part? Sometimes I still write things down, not because I'm afraid she'll change them, but because I need to prove to myself that I'm the one holding the pen now. I'd always known my mother was intense, but I never understood that intense could also mean terrifying. My name is Vivian Cole, and I was 17 then, living in a weathered Victorian house on Maple Hollow Road, up in the gray quiet of Vermont. The kind of place that always smelled faintly of wood polish and cold air. My mother, Eleanor Cole, was known in town for her composure. People said she was elegant, even otherworldly. They didn't see what I saw. The way her reflection lingered in the mirror after she turned away. The way her hands trembled when a picture frame sat half an inch crooked. She had a ritualistic sort of perfection about her. Hair in tight curls, nails always spotless. She would rearrange furniture for hours, scrubbing and polishing until the whole house felt sterile, like it was afraid to breathe wrong around her. Sometimes I'd find her whispering while she cleaned the basement, her lips moving in tiny secret prayers. When I asked what she was saying, she'd just smile faintly and say, "Just talking to the dust." I told myself it was harmless, that every family had their quirks, that the unease that pressed into my ribs whenever I watched her wasn't fear, just misunderstanding. But deep down I knew something was wrong. It was February 2018. Snowflakes floated like ash through the air, spinning down onto the old iron fence outside. I had just returned from a weekend at my dad's cabin, a small reprieve from the tension that lived in our walls. When I stepped out of the taxi and trudged up the drive with my backpack slung over one shoulder, I noticed the house looked stiller than usual. The curtains drawn, no light seeping through. "Mom," I called as I opened the door. The air smelled faintly of bleach. Nothing. I hung my coat by the door and took a few careful steps inside. Then I heard it, a thud, faint but rhythmic, coming from below. My stomach tightened. "Mom," I called again, louder this time. Silence except for that sound. Soft, uneven, like something shifting against wood. I moved toward the basement door. The old railing felt cold under my hand. Every step creaked like the house wanted to warn me away. The door itself was heavy, fitted with an old brass lock that usually rattled. Today, it didn't. It sat perfectly still, like it had been waiting. I swallowed hard, heart hammering. My fingers trembled as I turned the knob. It gave with a low groan. The smell hit first, metallic, raw, and sharp. Then my flashlight beam landed on her. A girl, maybe my age, maybe younger, was strapped to a metal table bolted into the floor. Her wrists were bound with leather. Her hair matted to her face with sweat and blood. Her eyes were open, wide, pleading, and standing over her was my mother. A scalpel glinted in her hand. She was humming softly, a tune I recognized, one she used to hum while brushing my hair when I was a kid. "Mom," my voice broke. "What are you doing?" She turned slowly. Her expression didn't change. If anything, she looked calm, gentle even. "Shh," she whispered, pressing a finger to her lips. "She's just part of the collection." I froze. The word echoed in my skull. Collection. There was a story that floated around Maple Hollow, about a woman who collected people, bodies found without eyes, families disappearing. I'd laughed it off before. Everyone had, but now I could barely breathe. The woman who'd tucked me in at night, who braided my hair and told me never to go into the woods alone. She was standing there, covered in someone else's blood. I stumbled backward, knocking into a stack of boxes. "Mom, please stop," I whispered, my throat dry. Her eyes softened in that awful motherly way. "You shouldn't have come home early, sweetheart," she murmured. "It isn't ready yet." I ran. I don't remember the stairs, only the way my heartbeat filled my ears like thunder. That night, I locked myself in my room and stared at the ceiling until morning. Every sound in the house made me flinch. The pipes, the wind, her footsteps pacing downstairs. But I didn't call the police. I couldn't. My little brother Nathan still adored her and still kissed her cheek goodnight and believed every word she said. If I told anyone, if she found out, he'd be next. So I smiled. I pretended. For the next few days, I acted like nothing had happened. I joked about recipes, asked about groceries, sat across from her at dinner. I even laughed when she teased me about my messy hair. My hands shook under the table, nails cutting into my palms to keep me from crying. I watched her carefully. When she left for errands, when she disappeared into the basement, when she hummed under her breath while washing dishes, the same song. Always the same. She was flawless on the outside. The perfect neighbor, the perfect mother. But every smile she gave now felt like a threat wrapped in warmth. Late one night, when the house went still and her door creaked closed, I crept downstairs. The flashlight trembled in my grip. The basement smelled like something had died there long ago. My feet stuck slightly to the floor as I stepped over dried streaks of red. I moved toward the far wall where the concrete looked uneven. I pressed my hand against it. Hollow. A false wall. My pulse roared in my ears as I pried it open. Behind it sat shelves lined with glass jars. Neat, orderly, labeled in her delicate handwriting. Inside each jar floated a single eye, milky and preserved in cloudy liquid. Each had a date. Each had a name, and one of the labels read, "Vivian Reserved." My stomach twisted so violently I thought I might be sick. The truth slammed into me like a hammer. My mother wasn't just strange or obsessive or off. She was the one. The stories, the whispers, the missing girls, and every single one of them traced back here. To her, to this house, to my mother, the collector. I backed away from the hidden wall, my flashlight shaking in my grip. The jars gleamed dully under the beam. Hundreds of eyes, some clouded with age, some so fresh they seemed to follow me. I pressed a trembling hand over my mouth to keep from crying out. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. She was too calm, too clever, too used to control. If I said one wrong word, she'd turn it on me. I had to be smarter. I had to plan, and I had to save that girl. Over the next few days, I lived two lives, the obedient daughter and the desperate survivor. I laughed when she spoke to me, helped her fold laundry, even listened as she chatted about recipes. But every moment alone, I prepared. I hid small doses of sedatives in my desk drawer, studied the locks, memorized every inch of the basement and its escape routes. I left subtle hints in conversations with people I trusted. My art teacher, Mrs. Jenkins across the street, never enough to alert Mom, but enough that if I disappeared, someone might notice. The storm came on a Thursday night. Thick snow pelted the windows, turning the world outside into a blur of white. The wind howled, drowning out all other sounds. It was the only night I could move without her hearing every floorboard creak. I took a slow breath and called up the stairs. "Mom, there's a leak in the attic. I think something's dripping near the vent." She appeared in the hallway, elegant as ever, her silk robe brushing the floor. "A leak in this weather?" She sighed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Then she smiled, that serene, chilling smile. "Let's have a look, sweetheart." I followed her up, the stairs narrowing, each step pressing the air from my lungs. I could smell her perfume, lavender and bleach. My hands trembled as I held the flashlight. The small bottle of sedative in my pocket clinked softly. When she bent to inspect the supposed leak, I unscrewed the cap. My voice came out too calm, too rehearsed. "You think we'll need to replace the insulation?" She chuckled. "Maybe. Though you really should have called me sooner." "I know," I murmured, pouring the liquid carefully onto the rim of her tea mug from earlier. "I just didn't want to bother you." Minutes passed. She took a sip, then another. I waited until her eyes fluttered and her movement slowed. "Mom," I said softly, moving closer. "You okay?" Her hand slipped from the mug. "Just a bit dizzy," she whispered. "I know." I caught her gently, lowering her to the floor. My heart thundered so hard I could barely hear my own thoughts. I grabbed the rope I'd hidden under the loose attic board and secured her wrists, whispering apologies the whole time. I'm sorry, Mom." Then I ran. Downstairs, through the kitchen, grabbing the phone. 911, I gasped. "It's my mother. She's hurt someone. There's a girl in the basement. Please hurry." My voice cracked as I gave our address. The operator tried to keep me calm, but I couldn't stop pacing, watching the attic door, half afraid she'd come down smiling again. When the police arrived, red and blue lights flashing against the snow, I felt my knees give out. They rushed inside. For a moment I thought it was over. It wasn't. Mom didn't scream, didn't plead. She smiled, the same quiet smile she always wore when someone complimented her roses. "You're overreacting," she told the officers in that melodic voice. My daughter's always been imaginative, but when they opened the basement, when the flashlight beams fell on the jars and the stains, the lies collapsed. I'll never forget the moment her face changed, that flicker of realization that it was over. The calm drained out of her, replaced by something feral, almost inhuman. She screamed then, not out of guilt, but rage. They dragged her out in cuffs, still cursing softly, still smiling between her teeth. After the arrest, our house became a crime scene. They sealed the doors with yellow tape and carried the evidence out in boxes. Jars, tools, names on labels. The town was in shock. Families finally got answers. Horrific, incomplete answers. To disappearances they'd mourned for years. Nathan refused to believe it. My little brother sobbed for days, insisting she was framed, that I was lying. "She loved us, Viv," he screamed once. "She loved us." I didn't know what to say. How do you tell a child that love and monstrosity can live in the same body? Therapists tried to help. They told me to process it, to forgive the past. But forgiveness isn't possible when your nightmares still smell like antiseptic and blood. For months, I couldn't sleep without hearing that faint humming from the basement. Couldn't look in mirrors without seeing the reflection of her eyes instead of mine. Time passed, but the fear never truly left. Even now, years later, I walk through empty streets and feel it. That prickle at the back of my neck, that sense that someone is watching. I catch myself noticing tiny details others ignore. A light left on in an abandoned house, a door ajar where it shouldn't be. But I survived. I made it out. I went to college, made friends, built a new version of myself from the ruins she left behind. People see me smile now and they think I'm strong. Maybe I am. But I know what real strength costs. I've learned that evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears perfume. Sometimes it cooks you breakfast and kisses your forehead goodnight. Sometimes it raises you. I've learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting through it even when your hands shake. It's calling for help when your voice feels like it's breaking. It's saving someone else even when part of you still loves the monster. Because sometimes the person meant to protect you is the one you must protect the world from. Appearances deceive. Evil smiles. But vigilance and courage are the only shields we have. I grew up in a house where order mattered more than love. At least that's how it always felt. My first memory isn't laughter or warmth. It's the sound of my mother's pen tapping against her clipboard as she watched me chew. 20 times, she'd say. Not 19, not 21. Even swallowing was governed by precision. It was Dublin, 2011. I was 11 years old. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. My dad worked long shifts at the printing press, steady, quiet, almost invisible. My little sister, Maya, had my same dark hair and wide brown eyes, though hers always seemed to hold more fear than wonder. And my mother, Rowena, kept the house spotless. Curtains perfectly pressed, grass trimmed short. Dinner plates lined like soldiers in the cabinet. The neighbors smiled when they passed. "Oh, the Bennetts are such a neat family," they'd say. If only they knew. Mom had once been a teacher at a private school. Everyone said she was brilliant, strict but fair. But that wasn't what the parents thought. Too many children came home crying. Too many complaints about her methods. When the school let her go, something inside her fractured. Everything she'd once demanded from her students, she now demanded from us, only harsher, sharper, relentless. Dad never stopped her. He'd sit at the kitchen table, eating quietly while she lectured. Sometimes at night, I'd hear him clear his throat like he wanted to say something. But then silence. Always silence. I loved to write. It was my secret escape. I had a small blue notebook hidden under my mattress, filled with stories about heroes, freedom, worlds that didn't exist. If Mom ever found it, she'd call it nonsense. "Stories don't feed families, Lucas," she'd snap. "Discipline does. Remember that." So I wrote in secret, my pencil moving quietly in the dark, words becoming the only air I could breathe. In our house, every moment had a rule. Wake up at 6 sharp, breakfast at 7, shoes lined perfectly by the door. Bathroom breaks were timed. Even brushing teeth had an order. Hair first, then teeth or else. Once Maya forgot. Mom slapped the toothbrush from her hand. "Do it right," she hissed. Maya's lip trembled, but she didn't cry. Crying only made it worse. Some nights I'd lie awake and hear Mom pacing the hallway, whispering to herself, "If I don't keep order, everything falls apart. Everything." Her steps would always pause outside my door. I'd stop breathing until I heard them move again. Even as a kid, I knew something was wrong with her. But when you grow up inside it, wrong starts to feel normal. The punishments began small. Forget to tuck in a chair? 10 minutes standing in the corner. Shoes left out of line? Balance them on your head until your neck burned. One night I went to bed early. I was exhausted from school, too tired to think. But then the door slammed open. Mom stood there, her silhouette cutting through the hallway light. "Do you think you control the schedule now?" she asked. "I'm just tired, Mom," I whispered. "Do you decide bedtime or do I?" "You do." "Exactly. Weakness is failure, and I won't raise a failure." She made me stand on one leg while redoing my homework. She filmed me as I tried to write, my leg trembling so badly that the pencil scratched holes in the paper. Maya tried to sneak in a glass of water. Mom caught her by the wrist. "Don't interfere. Let your brother learn." Her tone was like ice cracking. That night I thought about running away. But where would I go? Dad wasn't home most nights, and Maya was too young to leave behind. So I stayed. At school, I carried her rules with me like invisible chains. I sat perfectly straight, hands folded, never interrupting, never relaxing. Teachers praised me for my discipline, my manners. But inside, I was breaking apart. During group work, my hands would shake if I thought I'd done something wrong. I'd freeze the same way I did at home when Mom's eyes were on me. One afternoon, my English teacher, Mrs. Byrne, asked me to stay after class. "Lucas," she said softly, "you always look so nervous. Is something going on at home?" I forced a smile. "No, ma'am. Everything's fine." But she kept watching me with those kind, patient eyes, and something inside me cracked open. "She makes us follow rules all the time," I whispered. "Even how we chew." Mrs. Byrne leaned forward, her brow softening. "Who does, Lucas?" "My mom." The words felt sharp, dangerous, like saying them out loud could summon her. But once they left my mouth, I couldn't stop. It took weeks before anything happened. Mrs. Byrne must have told someone, because one afternoon, 2 strangers came to school. They had kind faces but serious eyes, and their voices were calm in that practiced, careful way. "We're just here to make sure you're safe, Lucas," one of them said. "Safe?" I echoed. The word felt like something from a storybook. I didn't even know what it meant anymore. At home, Mom seemed to know. She was sharper, watching us constantly. She checked our rooms every night, running her fingers along windowsills for dust, inspecting my fingernails to make sure they were trimmed evenly. One evening, Maya was just humming softly at the dinner table, some song she'd learned at school. "Quiet," Mom snapped, slamming her fork so hard against her plate it cracked. "Meals are for eating, not noise." Maya froze. Her eyes filled, but she didn't dare cry. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. Later that night, under the covers, I whispered, "One day it'll be better." "I promise." "How?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I said, "but it has to be." The next week, the social workers came to our house. Mom greeted them with that practiced, sugary smile, her hair perfectly set, her tone sweet enough to rot your teeth. She called us her angels and talked about how we loved her schedules. But they weren't fooled. They noticed the charts taped to the fridge, lists of chores, punishments, rules for every hour of the day. They saw her notebooks full of behavior logs. They asked quiet, careful questions. Dad sat in the corner saying nothing, just twisting his wedding ring around his finger. When the social workers finally left, Mom turned to me. Her smile was gone. "Did you tell them?" Her voice was low, dangerous. "Did you betray me?" "No, Mom," I said quickly. I didn't say anything. Her eyes stayed on me, cold, measuring. Then she turned away. That night, she paced the hallway for hours, muttering under her breath. I could hear her through the door. Discipline keeps us safe. Without it, everything falls apart. Then silence. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday. I'd left my school bag tilted against the wall instead of perfectly upright. It sounds stupid now, but that was all it took. "You think rules are a joke?" she shouted. "I just forgot," I stammered. "Forgot?" "There is no forgetting!" She yanked the bag, dumping my books across the floor. "Pick them up. Do it again. Do it right." My hands shook as I stacked them, trying to make the corners even. She slapped one out of my hand. The crack of paper and skin made Maya start crying from the doorway. That night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. The next day at school, I told Mrs. Byrne everything. The punishments, the recordings, the rules, the pacing. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, pale and still. When I finished, her voice trembled slightly. "You did the right thing, Lucas," she said. "We're going to help." A week later, they came back, this time with police. Mom tried to fight them. She said she was a loving mother who just wanted disciplined children. But the notebooks, the videos, even the neighbors who admitted they'd heard the shouting, it was too much. They took her away. I thought I'd feel free, but mostly I felt empty. Dad tried. He really did. He let us eat cereal for dinner if we wanted. He didn't care if our shoes were a mess by the door. But the silence in the house was unbearable. I'd sit at the table stiff as ever, waiting for rules that never came. Every tick of the clock made my skin crawl like she was still somewhere nearby watching. Maya adjusted faster. She laughed more, hummed again, sometimes too loud. I envied her for it. For me, the rules never really left. Years later, I became a writer. The dream I'd once hidden under my mattress turned into my life. I filled pages with worlds where kids fought monsters instead of timetables, where freedom was messy and beautiful and loud. People said my stories had structure, control, every word in its place. They had no idea where that came from. Even now, when I sit down to write, I sometimes hear her voice in my head. Not good enough. Not perfect. But I keep writing anyway because surviving her meant finding my own voice, even if hers still echoes. Control without love isn't discipline. It's cruelty. From the outside, order can look beautiful, but from the inside, it's just a cage. I've learned that freedom is messy, imperfect, and terrifying. But it's real. Children don't grow in the shadow of punishment, they grow in the light of compassion. And when love turns into obsession, it isn't love at all. I can't remember the exact moment when my mother's care turned into something else. Maybe it wasn't a moment at all. More like ivy creeping up a wall, so slow and quiet you don't notice until the bricks are gone. When I was little, she tucked me in at night, read me stories, and packed lunches with tiny handwritten notes. But after my dad left when I was 5, the air in the house shifted. It wasn't sudden. It was a slow tightening, like strings being pulled one by one. By the time I was 12 in the fall of 2023, Pinehurst Avenue didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a training camp, and my mother, Margaret, was the commander. I was her only soldier. Everything had a rule. Shoes lined up at the door. Homework checked twice. Dinner at 6 sharp. Lights out at 9. If I forgot one step, the whole house seemed tense, waiting for her voice. One night, I forgot to text her before stopping by my friend's house after school. We were just playing video games, laughing, losing track of time. I didn't think a quick message would matter. But at 7 on the dot, there she was, standing in the doorway, pale-faced and shaking with quiet fury. "Caleb," she said, her voice low but sharp as glass. "Do you understand the consequences of your actions?" I stammered. "I'm sorry, Mom, I'll come home now." Her expression didn't soften. She turned and walked ahead of me, silent all the way home. My stomach twisted with dread. When we got back, she locked my bedroom door from the outside. I could hear her footsteps in the hallway, steady and precise like a metronome ticking out my punishment. I called out at first, my voice cracking in the dark, but she didn't answer. Hours passed before the lock clicked open again. She didn't yell. She never really did. Somehow that made it worse. "You must learn responsibility," she said evenly. "You can't be trusted if you don't follow rules." Then silence, thick, suffocating silence. I sat on the bed, staring at the floor, unsure if I was angry, ashamed, or both. That night, something inside me shifted. I began thinking of the house as a cage. Not one with bars, but invisible walls that seemed to close in a little tighter every day. Soon it wasn't just curfews or forgotten texts. She started checking everything, my messages, my email, even the photos on my tablet. She kept a small notebook where she wrote down my comings and goings, the exact times I left for school and when I returned. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that she was just scared because Dad wasn't around. But then she installed a camera in the living room. "So I can make sure you're safe when I'm at work," she said. But it didn't feel like safety. It felt like surveillance. Even when she wasn't home, I could feel her eyes on me through that little black lens. Friends stopped coming over. One afternoon, my friend Jacob showed up with his skateboard. We were sitting in the driveway when Mom came outside, clipboard in hand. Caleb has homework scheduled right now, she said firmly. Jacob froze, looking embarrassed. I mumbled something, an excuse I think, and went back inside. Later that night, she said, "You don't need distractions. Friends will only pull you down." I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded. Eventually, I found one place she hadn't thought of, the attic. I'd sneak up there with a flashlight and a comic book, hiding between dusty boxes and cobwebs. It was the only place I could breathe. Sometimes I whispered to myself, rehearsing what I'd say if I ever had the courage to talk back. But that didn't last either. One evening, she caught me climbing down the attic ladder. "What were you doing up there?" she demanded, her eyes narrowing. "Nothing," I said quickly. "Just looking around." She didn't believe me. The next day, I heard the sound of a new lock clicking into place. School became the only place I felt remotely normal. But even there, I carried her voice inside me. I sat straighter than anyone else, raised my hand for every question, double-checked every answer. Teachers thought I was disciplined. The truth was, I was terrified of mistakes. During group projects, I froze if I thought I might mess up. Once, during a science project, I glued a piece in the wrong spot. My hand started shaking so badly I couldn't fix it. "Hey," my partner Emily whispered. "It's just glue, Caleb. Relax." I wanted to tell her it wasn't about glue, that in my house, mistakes weren't allowed, but the words stayed trapped in my throat. A few days later, Mrs. Turner, my homeroom teacher, pulled me aside. "You're always so tense, Caleb," Mrs. Turner said one afternoon, her brow creased with concern. "Is something going on at home?" I forced a smile, shaking my head. "I'm fine," but I wasn't. Nights were the worst. I'd lie on my back, staring at the ceiling until my eyes blurred, waiting for the sound of her footsteps. Sometimes I heard her whispering outside my door, her voice soft and trembling. "If I don't keep order, everything falls apart. Everything." At first, I tried not to listen. But over time, I began to wonder if maybe she was right. Maybe if I followed every rule perfectly, nothing bad would happen. Maybe I really was the problem. That's how her cage worked. It wasn't built with locks or bars, but with doubt. It made me question my own judgment until her voice sounded more real than mine. Things escalated when she installed another camera, this time in my bedroom. "It's for your safety," she said. "You need supervision to stay on track." I wanted to scream, "That's not safety, that's prison." But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I nodded like I always did, pretending to agree. That night, I hid under my blanket, trying to block out the faint red light glowing from the corner. It pulsed like a heartbeat, reminding me I was never truly alone. A few days later, I left my shoes by the couch instead of the rack by the door. She appeared almost instantly, standing over them like they were evidence of a crime. "Caleb," she said, voice low and even. "What does this say about your respect for order?" I forgot," I murmured. "I'll move them." "Forgotten rules," she replied coldly, "are the same as broken ones." She made me stand in the corner, holding the shoes above my head until my arms trembled and burned. Outside, I could hear Maya, our neighbor's daughter, laughing in her backyard. The sound felt like something from another universe, a place where life was light and unmeasured. That's when I started lying. Little things at first. I told her I had no homework when I did, just so I could sneak into the attic for a few stolen minutes of quiet. I told her my friends were too busy to hang out when the truth was they'd stopped asking. Every lie made me sick with guilt, but it was the only way I could breathe. By then, even silence felt dangerous. I didn't break free all at once. It happened in cracks, small, quiet ones, until the whole wall finally gave way. It was during a math quiz. My pencil slipped from my hand and suddenly I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, my vision blurred, and the numbers on the page started swimming. Mrs. Turner rushed to my side, kneeling beside my desk. "Caleb, look at me," she said softly. "You're safe." Safe. The word didn't sound real. Later in her office, I told her everything, the cameras, the rules, the punishments. I waited for her to tell me I was exaggerating, that all moms were strict sometimes, but she didn't. She just nodded and said, "You did the right thing telling me." Social workers came after that. They walked through the house, flipping through her notebooks, asking calm questions that made my stomach twist. Mom smiled through all of it, saying she was just a concerned parent, but they saw enough. I ended up staying with my dad for a while. His apartment was small, messy, alive in a way our old house never was. For the first time, I could breathe. I ate cereal at midnight. I left my shoes in a heap by the door. I stayed up late reading comics without feeling guilty. Still, the cage came with me. I flinched at every sudden noise. I sat at dinner with my back straight, waiting for rules that never came. Even years later in high school, the fear lingered like a shadow that wouldn't fade. I wanted freedom, but I didn't know how to live inside it. Now, I'm a writer. The stories I once whispered to myself in the attic have become my way out. The words make sense of what didn't. Mom's voice still echoes sometimes, not good enough, not perfect, but I keep writing anyway. Because I've learned something. Love without trust suffocates, and control without compassion turns into cruelty. What my mother called discipline was really fear wearing the mask of care. A child can't grow inside an invisible cage. They only learn to doubt themselves. Freedom, messy, imperfect, unpredictable, is where love actually lives. I used to think my home was normal. Now I know it was a lesson I was never supposed to survive. I used to think my life was normal, or at least as normal as it could be in Burlington, Vermont. My name's Lily Carter, and I was 12 when I first realized that the world outside my house was one I could never really belong to. Mom, Monica, was the center of everything. She had that kind of smile people in the neighborhood envied, the kind that made you believe she was the perfect parent, polite, charming, always knowing the right thing to say. But behind that smile was something that pressed on your lungs until you forgot how to breathe. She grew up alone, I learned later, an only child in a house of rules, where affection was earned, not given. I think she carried that house inside her. To the neighbors, she was devoted. To me, she was every slammed door, every frozen stare, every intercepted phone call. Dad left when I was 6. She told me more than once that she'd saved me from him, from abandonment, from chaos. But what she really saved me from was freedom. Friends are dangerous, she used to say. People change you, Lily. They take pieces of you away. So I learned not to ask. Then came that Friday night when Emily texted me about her birthday sleepover. I remember sitting on my bed, legs crossed, clutching my phone so tight my fingers went numb. Balloons, cake, movies, just a normal night. The thought made my heart flutter, to laugh, to be somewhere I could breathe without permission. But before I could even reply, I heard it, the long, aching creak of the hallway floorboards. Mom didn't knock. She never did. "Who are you texting, Lily?" Her voice was soft, but it cut through the room like glass sliding over ice. "Just Emily," I said, trying to keep my tone light. She's having a party." Her eyes flicked from my phone to my face, sharp and measuring. "And you think you're going?" I felt my throat tighten. I didn't answer, but I didn't have to. Her silence filled in everything I didn't say. That night I sat cross-legged on my bed, sketchpad in my lap, the sound of pencil on paper trying to drown out the ache in my chest. I drew faces I'd never seen, girls laughing, running, free. But outside my door, I heard her breathing, slow, steady, listening. I think she liked to remind me she was always there. The first real punishment came the day I mentioned a classmate, just mentioned. I don't remember what I said, only the look on her face. Her eyes like two cold pins, her jaw stiff, that voice low and trembling with fury. "You think you can replace me with them?" I didn't answer. I'd already learned that answers weren't required, only obedience. By the time I was 10, she'd drawn up a new constitution for our lives. No sleepovers, no phone calls without her in the room, no letters, no social media. She deleted every app from my phone herself, watching me as she did it, her reflection in the black screen like a judge sealing my sentence. Every attempt I made to reach out, to anyone, ended the same way, her standing behind me as I wrote pages of apologies, 10 pages of confessions, 10 pages of promises that I'd never betray her again. She'd pace behind me, hands folded, eyes fixed on the back of my neck. "Slower," she'd say. "Mean it this time." School was the only place I could pretend to exist. I'd draw during recess and faces of kids laughing, whispering, sharing secrets. I'd watch their shadows stretch across the playground and imagine stepping into them, blending in. But even there, I could feel her. Every time the bell rang, every time my teacher said my name, it was like Mom's eyes were watching through the walls. The first time I tried to sneak out, I didn't even make it to the sidewalk. She was waiting at the end of the hall, her silhouette framed in the porch light. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. She just grabbed my wrist and pulled me inside. Her breath brushed my ear as she leaned in close. "Every time you look at them," she whispered, "you're telling me I'm not enough. Don't you ever forget who saved you, Lily? Who stayed when your father didn't?" Her fingers loosened, but the words didn't. They stayed, like fingerprints on glass, impossible to wipe away. I learned early that freedom was a lie. Laughter, curiosity, even joy, all of it carried consequences. By 12, I had built my own quiet rebellion. Whispered phone calls in the bathroom, a notebook hidden behind my dresser, sketches that said what I couldn't. Each page was a secret escape, each drawing a breath I wasn't allowed to take. Emily was my lifeline. The one person who made me feel like I existed beyond the borders of my house. But even her friendship had to be hidden like contraband. I'd delete messages, memorize her words, and pretend I didn't know her when Mom was around. That afternoon, I thought Mom was out running errands. The house was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the wind brushing the window panes. I typed quickly, "Can I come over this weekend?" My heart raced as I hit send. I didn't even hear her come in. "Who are you texting?" I froze. Her reflection appeared in the TV screen before I could answer. "Then no one," I stammered, hiding the phone behind my back. She moved fast, faster than I remembered her ever moving. The phone was out of my hands before I could blink. "You ungrateful little snake," she hissed. Her voice shook, not with volume, but with venom. "I gave you life, and you choose them over me?" Tears burned behind my eyes. "I just wanted to go to Emily's," I whispered. I want a friend." Her expression hardened, eyes narrowing like she'd just discovered a betrayal she couldn't forgive. "You don't need friends," she said slowly, pressing each word like a stamp into my skin. "You have me. That's enough." She slammed the phone onto the table. The sound cracked through the house like thunder. That night, I filled 20 pages of apologies. "My fault. I'm sorry. I'll do better." My wrist burned, my vision blurred. But I wrote until she was satisfied, until I could hear her soft footsteps fade down the hall. School became my only safe place. Ms. Parker, my art teacher, noticed before anyone else did. She lingered by my desk one day, eyes resting on my sketchbook. "You draw a lot of doors," she said gently, "but none of them open." I remember looking up at her, the words stuck in my throat. "They're not supposed to." Her eyes softened. She didn't push, not then. But over the next few weeks, she kept checking in, small things. A compliment, a note, a piece of candy slipped onto my desk. Slowly, she built something I'd never known before. Trust. When I finally told her, just a fraction, barely even the truth, she listened. And she believed me. That simple act changed everything. Child services came 2 weeks later. I still remember Mom's smile when the social worker walked in, that perfect porcelain grin that fooled everyone. Her voice was honey, her posture calm. To them, she was warmth personified. But behind her eyes, I saw it. The storm. I was placed with a foster family temporarily. They lived on a quiet street with a golden retriever and a porch swing that creaked when you sat on it. Freedom felt like vertigo. I rode a bike for the first time, ate a cake at a birthday party, laughed until my stomach hurt. The air didn't feel heavy anymore, but I kept waiting for it to. At night, when the house went still, I'd hear her voice in my head. Betrayal. "Lily, you betrayed me." Mom's lessons ran deeper than any bruise. She hadn't just controlled my actions, and she'd claimed my mind. Made me believe independence was dangerous, that safety existed only in her orbit. I grew older, but the fear grew with me. Quiet, patient, waiting. In high school, I took psychology, desperate to understand what she'd done. I learned words for it: enmeshment, coercion, trauma bonding. None of them erased the weight of it, but they gave me language. And language, I realized, was power. Mom faded from my life after that. She stopped calling, or maybe I stopped answering. But she lingered in the smallest things. The hesitation before I trusted someone, the way I flinched at raised voices, the boundaries I built too tall. When I turned 20, I moved to a city far from Burlington. My apartment was small, messy, and utterly mine. I painted again. Bright colors this time, faces with eyes and smiles. I learned how to be a friend, really be one, without fear that love would turn into a leash. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit by my window and think of her, not with anger, but with a strange kind of clarity. Survival, I realized, doesn't mean forgetting. It means understanding, healing, taking back what was stolen. Love isn't supposed to feel like a cage. Protection isn't supposed to suffocate. Freedom is terrifying. But it's also the only thing that ever felt real. And even when the shadows whisper, even when the old fear stirs, I choose freedom anyway. I can't remember exactly when the house on Cedar Brook Drive stopped feeling like home and started feeling like a stage. Maybe it was after Dad left. Maybe it was long before. Mom always said ballet had taught her that perfection wasn't optional. It was survival. When I was little, I thought that meant she'd teach me grace. But by the time I was 13, I realized it meant she'd watch me the way a choreographer watches a dancer. Every move measured, every flaw magnified. The Whitmore house looked normal enough from the outside. 2 stories, a tidy yard, roses crawling up the trellis. Inside it was all polished floors and sharp corners, every room arranged with the precision of an exhibit. The faint scent of lemon polish hung in the air, thick enough to sting the back of my throat. Her fingerprints were everywhere, vases lined up by height, books stacked by color, picture frames at perfect right angles. Nothing ever out of place. Nothing ever real. I used to love sketching the skyline from my bedroom window, the messy tangle of rooftops, crooked fire escapes, and power lines. But Mom said it was a waste of time. Focus on things that matter, Laya, she'd remind me, her tone gentle but edged with warning. One Thursday in September, I came home with a geometry test balled up in my sweaty hand. 6%, not bad. My friend Mariah had gotten a 72 and was thrilled. I slid the paper onto the kitchen counter, praying Mom wouldn't see it. She saw everything. Her eyes flicked down, taking in the red pen marks. Her lips tightened. "We don't accept mediocrity in this house," she said, her voice calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that made the air go still. That night turned into hours of punishment disguised as correction. She made me sit at the dining table while she set up her tablet to record. I had to redo every single problem, explaining each step out loud like a hostage forced to confess. Every time I hesitated, she'd interrupt. "Slower. Think, Laya. Do you want to embarrass yourself forever?" The clock crawled past midnight. My fingers ached. My stomach growled, but I wasn't allowed to eat or use the bathroom. Tears smeared the ink until the numbers bled together. "I'm tired, Mom," I whispered once. Her eyes flashed. "Tired? You can rest when you've earned it. Do you want to end up bagging groceries for the rest of your life? Do it again." By the end, my throat burned from swallowing sobs. She clicked off the tablet, straightened her blouse, and said quietly, "You'll thank me one day." I went to bed numb, clutching my sketchbook under the blanket like contraband. The pages filled with crooked lines and jagged buildings, shapes that didn't have to be perfect. In those moments, the city I drew was the only place I could breathe. The punishment spread like mold. First math, then everything. She started inspecting my room each morning. I couldn't even leave my pencils scattered on the floor. She made me line them up by color, her fingers grazing each jar like a commander reviewing weapons. "Disorder breeds failure," she'd say. She corrected my speech constantly. If I said "like" too many times, she'd stop me mid-sentence and make me start again. If I mispronounced a word, she'd sigh dramatically. "Articulate, Laya, don't sound like some street kid." Even dinner became another performance. Forks had to be held the right way, elbows tucked in, answers rehearsed. Every moment of my life became a lesson I never asked for. At school, I got quieter. My friends invited me to birthday parties and sleepovers, but I always said no. I couldn't risk Mom finding out she didn't approve of them. Teachers noticed the way I flinched when papers were handed back, how I stared too long before unfolding them. But no one asked the right questions. I started hiding my grades. Anything under 95 I erased and rewrote. I even learned to forge Mom's signature so teachers wouldn't know she hadn't seen my progress reports. The lies ate at me. My stomach twisted every time the phone rang, terrified it was school calling home. One night, after she tore apart my English essay for lazy phrasing, I locked myself in the bathroom. I stared into the mirror at my pale reflection, my eyes red from crying. I pressed my hand flat against the glass. "This isn't me," I whispered. But I didn't know who me was anymore. The girl who laughed too loud with her friends, or the one who sat frozen under fluorescent lights while her mother dissected her worth. That fall, the nightmares began. I'd dream I was sitting at the dining table again, surrounded by shadows that whispered her words. Wrong again. Useless. The voices echoed until the walls seemed to breathe. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, feeling like the house had been watching me sleep. Reality wasn't much different. One Saturday morning, I was sketching quietly on the porch while Mom scrubbed the kitchen. Sunlight slanted across the steps. I'd almost finished shading a crooked row of buildings when she appeared behind me. Without a word, she yanked the paper from my hands. "Buildings? This is what you're wasting time on?" she snapped. "It's just a hobby," I muttered, staring at the floor. Her voice sliced the air. "Nothing is just anything. Everything counts. You either excel or you rot." I wanted to scream. Instead, I hid my trembling hands under the porch cushion, the sketchbook wedged beneath. Later that night, when she was asleep, I pulled it out again and traced the faint pencil lines she hadn't managed to tear. The paper shook, but I kept drawing. Crooked buildings, cracked windows, a city that didn't need to be perfect to feel alive. Drawing became my rebellion, small, secret, and dangerously precious. Sometimes neighbors asked if everything was all right. Mrs. Jenkins, the old woman across the street, caught me once sitting on the curb with my eyes red and swollen. "Rough day?" she asked softly, her voice lined with concern. I nodded, staring at the pavement. Mom's words echoed in my head, "Never air dirty laundry." So I forced a smile. "Just tired." Mrs. Jenkins gave me a sympathetic look before heading back inside. I watched her go, my throat burning with all the things I couldn't say. Every test felt like a landmine. Every dinner felt like walking barefoot on glass. I started biting my nails until they bled, the metallic taste of anxiety lingering on my tongue. My chest tightened every time I heard Mom's heels clicking down the hardwood hallway, that sharp rhythm that meant inspection time. When I turned 15, I begged to join the art club at school. "It's after classes," I said carefully, trying to sound logical, not desperate. "It won't interfere with homework." She didn't even look up from her laptop. "Art club?" she repeated, her tone flat. "That's a waste of time. Unless you're planning to starve in some basement studio, forget it." "But Mom..." Her voice cut through mine, sharp as broken glass. "Don't argue. I'm not paying for this house so you can chase childish fantasies." I swallowed everything I wanted to scream. That night I sat in bed with my sketchbook propped on my knees, drawing in the dark. The glow of my phone flashlight was dim and shaky, but it was enough. Each pencil stroke felt like an act of defiance, quiet, invisible rebellion against her version of love. By junior year, panic attacks had become routine. My hands trembled whenever a teacher passed back graded papers. Sometimes I'd lock myself in the school bathroom, clutching the edge of the sink just to steady my breathing. One counselor noticed. She caught me after class and said gently, "Laya, is everything okay at home?" My throat closed. My mind raced with images of Mom's face if she ever found out I'd said something. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a shaky smile. "Just stressed." She nodded, unconvinced, but didn't push. At home, nothing changed. Mom still recorded my study sessions, the tablet perched like a silent witness. Every hesitation became evidence in her courtroom. "See?" she'd say, replaying my mistakes. "You lose focus. That's why you fail." But it wasn't proof to me, it was surveillance. Even when she wasn't in the room, I felt her watching, her eyes embedded in the walls. When I finally left for college, I thought the nightmares would stop. I packed my sketchbooks, a few clothes, and a fragile kind of hope. My new apartment downtown was tiny, a creaky one-bedroom with peeling paint and a window that barely opened, but it was mine. The first night there, I sat on the floor surrounded by boxes and cried. Not from sadness, but from the strange, hollow quiet. No footsteps, no orders. No lemon polish stinging the air. And yet, when the fluorescent kitchen light flickered, my body tensed automatically. Some ghosts don't vanish when you cross a city line. I'm older now. I live in Portland, not far from Cedarbrook Drive. Sometimes I pass by the old house. The roses still climb the trellis, their petals immaculate. The lawn's still perfect. From the outside, you'd never guess what happened behind those walls. I still catch myself triple-checking emails before I send them. I still hesitate before speaking in meetings, worried I'll sound foolish. At night, I sometimes wake to the echo of her voice in my mind. Perfection is the only way to survive. And yet, I draw. The walls of my apartment are covered in sketches, messy, uneven, alive. Fire escapes twisting like vines, crooked rooftops, graffiti-filled alleys glowing under streetlights. My art doesn't make money, but it makes me feel real. Every line belongs to me, not her. People say scars fade. Maybe the ones on the skin do, but the deeper ones, the invisible ones, and they just change shape. They teach you how to move, how to flinch, how to breathe. My mother's control left me anxious, wary, afraid of mistakes. But it also left me determined, desperate even, to build a life where imperfection isn't a sin. Sometimes I wonder if she knows what she did. If she ever sits in that silent house and feels the echo of her own words coming back at her. Maybe she does. Maybe she doesn't. But I've stopped waiting for an apology. The house is hers. The shadow it left, that's mine to fight. Control disguised as love leaves wounds that never fully heal. Perfection isn't the path to worth. It's the fear of imperfection that destroys us. True strength, I've learned, comes from the courage to be human, flawed, unfinished, and free.